Okay, thank you. And I'm supposed to read the script, right? Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 16th Architecture Review Board meeting. Sorry, we're starting a couple minutes late. Pursuant to AB 361, this meeting will be held with the option to attend by teleconference, video conference, or in person. During the meeting, members of the public may provide live public comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of public comment on that item, and they are located over there, I think. Speakers may address items that are not on the agenda during the oral communications portion of the meeting. If a public comment speaker wishes to speak on more than one agenda item, please indicate so on the speaker card. Spoken comments via a computer will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the board, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 965-6189-1491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, click on raise hand. When called, please limit your remarks to the time allotted. Spoken public comments using a smartphone will also be accepted through the Zoom mobile application. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 96561891491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit *9 on your phone so that we know you wish to speak. Hey, there's no reason why that can't be fun, right? All right, can we get a roll call?
Yes, Chair Thompson.
Here.
Vice Chair Hirsch.
Here.
Board Member Balte.
Present.
Board Member Chen.
Present.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Present.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first item is the adoption of a resolution authorizing the use of teleconference for Architecture Review Board meeting during the COVID-19 state of emergency. I think we would need someone to provide a motion.
Move that we adopt the motion. Make the motion that we adopt the item
The resolution.
as presented. Yes.
Seconded.
All right. Motion by Bolte, second by.
I'd like to make the same comment to my motion as last time. I think this is only okay given that we're in a state of emergency. Otherwise, we should have specific direction from City Council to continue such hybrid meetings.
Okay. And I'll also make a comment that I think hybrid meetings are here to stay regardless of emergencies. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the motion? Okay. Let's take a roll call.
Board Member Balte.
Yes.
Board Member Chen.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch.
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is oral communications. Public may speak to any item not on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
I don't have any public speaker cards for oral communications, and I do not have any people on Zoom right now.
All right, great. All right, thank you. Next item is agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
Sorry, no changes at this time.
Thank you. All right, our next item is city official reports.
Yes, so good morning. My name is Jody Gerhardt. I'm the manager of current planning. We're pulling up the schedule right now. So this just shows our future ARB hearings. We will continue hybrid for the foreseeable future. On the next page, I probably excited you by thinking you had a week off, but we do have some items that are now on the agenda. So there's another 180 El Camino project that will be happening on the 7th. This is building EE next to Restoration Hardware. It's probably, I believe it's 2 restaurants. And then for ad hoc committee, 2585 East Bayshore, they need to come back for ad hoc committee. And so I'll have to double check who the board members were for that. But that will be our hearing for July 7th. And then July 21st, I will not be here, but I believe there will be a hearing. We have the home key project coming forward. And I know that the ARB would also like to hear more about council agendas and things of that nature. So I'll try and do a little bit more at the end of today's meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Alrighty, our next item is our first action item, which is 180 El Camino Real. This is a quasi judicial, sorry. What is this one? Yes, it is quasi judicial recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a board level architecture review application to allow for a new storefront facade and signage for Hummus Mediterranean Kitchen Restaurant. I can hand it over to staff. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Can we go through the board members and note any disclosures?
I'll disclose that I visited the site earlier this week.
Thank you.
I as well visited the site earlier this week.
Thank you.
I visited the site early this week.
Thank you.
Same.
Thank you. And me too. I visited it yesterday. Okay. I'll hand it over to staff now.
Thank you, Chair, board members. Tamara Harrison, Michael Baker International, presenting as contract planner for planning staff. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, this action item is for the Hummus Mediterranean Kitchen facade change and signage. Sorry. Located at the Stanford Shopping Center at 180 El Camino Real within Building E, Suite 715, and is the formerly the Coca-Cola Bakery. As the project is located within the Stanford Shopping Center, it is subject to the center's master tenant facade and sign program. This illustration here shows a layout of the center and shows that the green lines indicate tenant spaces which require city review. Those storefronts that exceed 35 feet in length require ARB public hearing, and those storefronts that are either less than 35 feet or equal to require staff level review. So staff has determined, given the location of this tenant space and the length of the storefront, it requires the ARB public hearing. Again, the project is located in the Stanford Center off of the Sand Hill entrance and faces Plum Lane. And the project seeks to change the existing facade to accommodate the Hummus Mediterranean Kitchen as a new tenant. The project will also propose new signage for the tenant, and the project has been conditioned for an additional bike space for the overall center. The project does not propose to increase the floor area ratio, the height, or lot coverage of the site, and doesn't propose to change the use of the tenant space. However, it seeks to change the interior and exterior of the tenant space. The design components for the exterior facade include white stucco, white oak wood slats, open storefront glazing at the bifold doors, a recessed green door and mosaic tile floor entry, as well as metal accents and signage. The design has been found to be consistent with the master program and consistent with the character of the Stanford Shopping Center. This colors and material board just kind of calls out the different materials that are proposed for the facade. You can see the primary material is the white stucco here at the top. The wood slat accents will be highlighted over each metal canopy at the bifold doors. Again, these metal canopies are existing, and so I think they'll just be updated and painted. The green recessed entry door will be located on the central portion of the facade, and the mosaic tile flooring just below there. One item I don't have highlighted here, but I'd like to point out is the proposed outdoor dining spaces. There are 2 of them, and they will be partially enclosed by perforated metal steel panels, decorative panels. As far as signage considerations, signage is subject to the Palo Alto Municipal Code, which allows for several wall signs within the allowable sign area regulations. The subject facade is 53.4 by 24.6, so roughly 1,313 square feet, which would allow, per the sign code, a maximum of 75 square foot of wall signage. The sign code also allows for blade signs up to 3 square feet in area. Signage is also, again, subject to the master program for the center, and the master program allows for 1 primary facade wall sign and 1 blade sign. As far as key considerations and conditions, the project has been found to be consistent with the ARB findings, the master tenant facade program, as well as the city sign code. And so with that, staff recommends the Architectural Review Board take the following action and recommend approval of the proposed project facade changes and signage to the Director of Planning and Development Services based on findings and subject to staff's conditions of approval. This concludes my presentation and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we'll hand it over to the applicant.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Harrison. Chair Thompson, board members, pleasure to be once again back in front of you in the city of Palo Alto. Again, this project is over at Stanford Shopping Center, which I know you're very familiar with. And we have our team available today, designers, architectural firm, as well as we have Amir Husani with Hummus that was going to go ahead and give a brief presentation on the use. And so I'll hand it over to Amir at this time.
Thank you. No pressure. Yeah, so we're actually super excited to.
Oh, wait, sorry, 1 second. I think we need to put the timer on for 10 minutes. Do we have that? Okay, go ahead.
Get his name.
And yes, I need you to state and spell your name for the record. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Amir Hosseini. My name is spelled Amir Hossseini. Again, I think we're super excited for this location. I don't necessarily have a presentation itself. Just wanted to introduce myself to you guys, to all of you. And I guess a little background about the concept. We're more of a fine casual cuisine. We like to think ourselves as an affordable player in the highly expensive food space these days. But we like to make our food fun, healthy, fresh, and yeah, happy to answer any questions that you have for me about the concept itself and kind of take it from there.
All right, Jennifer, I don't know if you'd like to go ahead and give the presentation for the restaurant.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jennifer Downing. I'm with Mokume Design Studio, and Jennifer is Jennifer, Downing, Downing, and Mokume is Mokume. All right, I'm going to share my screen. So again, my name is Jennifer with Mokume Design Studio. Our studio is the lead designer for the Hummus Mediterranean concept here at Stanford Shopping Center. And what we're looking at here is our primary rendering for the space. So what we were hoping to do, I'm going to go back to kind of some of the original. When we looked at the space, we thought there was a lot of potential here, but there was definitely some room to bring the facade up to the brand standards. So we really were drawing upon the iconic Mediterranean, what you think of when you think of the Mediterranean, lots of white plaster, a freshness, a brightness, hence the greens and the bright white plaster, and then replacing the existing kind of beige wood slats with something a little bit fresher. So essentially doing a nice white oak that has a whitewash on it, and then finishing that off with a nice epoxy sealer, a bright green entryway to kind of draw your eye into the space, and the nice mosaic, which is kind of speaks to the Mediterranean vibe and also brings some vibrancy to that space. The metal finishes that we're using are dark bronze, a nice contrast to the white stucco. And let's see, what else can I add? Oh, we're also, the decorative components that we're introducing as far as the like the barrier for the exterior seating are a nice dark bronze. We're doing a die cut metal right there. And then as well on the bottom side of the awnings, we're doing the same thing in a different pattern. And there we're trying to bring in some of the Mediterranean patterning, specifically from the side of Turkey, because that's where our owners originate from. And then also, I guess the other thing is to say that we are trying to bring in a little bit of biophilia, which you're seeing on the exterior. We're going to have two really large pots with dwarf olive trees, again, indicative of the Mediterranean space. And I'm also here to answer any questions you might have.
Jennifer, thank you so much. I get at this time we'd return it back to Chair Thompson and the board for questions or discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
Chair Thompson, I haven't received any speaker cards for this item, and we do not have anyone on Zoom right now.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the board of the applicant or staff? Board Member Balte?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions for the architect, I suppose. The outdoor guardrail pattern is unclear to me looking at the drawings. Could you explain what is the profile of that metal pattern? This is for the architect, I think, but
I'm gonna defer to our designer. She had selected a pattern.
Hi there. Yeah, so the pattern, we were looking at some of the more traditional Turkish and Mediterranean patterns. So the rendering is the best basically indication of what we're looking to achieve there. So it would be a custom die cut pattern into the metal barrier, essentially, to create that aesthetic. Again, do you want me to show my screen again? Is that helpful? Or do you have it in front of you?
well, if you could just reference which drawing
Sure. Here.
you're supposed to be looking at here. I mean, this is just a question, so I'm just hoping to resolve what the actual application is.
Yeah, so this is it here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so then that's what brought up my question. If I look at sheet A210, there's a few elevations of the same railing which appear different. Should we interpret then that those are just not quite correctly shown?
Let's see, I'm going to 210. Jim, can you speak to this? I would say that that's correct, that the renderings are what we're looking to achieve, and that these are subjective, I guess, as to the, like, does that make sense?
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The second question is regarding the white oak slats on the exterior. On the sample board, they're shown as a veneer material. It's a thin piece of white oak over a plywood substrate. Is that the intent, or do you intend to make them out of solid wood?
The intent is to make them out of solid wood. That is for color reference only, color and finish reference only. So yes, in the final, when we actually build it, and I believe the finish schedule references this as well, it will be a solid white oak.
Okay, great. And then can you, just because I haven't had time to look at your schedule, what is the actual finish on that material?
On the white oak?
Yeah, and what are you using to keep it from deteriorating in the sun?
Sure. So we're going to do a whitewash on it, and then we're looking at a marine grade epoxy sealant, so and a clear matte. So we were looking specifically at a brand called MAS, M-A-S, which makes essentially epoxy for yachts and boats and such. So we want to make sure that we're something that's high quality that can take the elements.
Great. Thank you. That's good to hear. The last two questions, if you don't mind, Osma, have to do more with the outdoor space and the lease area. I'm wondering, is it defined anywhere? What is the actual lease area or the outdoor area you intend to use for seating? I noticed on the drawing 6101, where did that? One of the plans references space 751C. I'm wondering what that's supposed to mean. I'm trying to get a sense of how big that space is going to be, because I think it's a little bit tight.
I remember both saying the outdoor dining areas total 182 square feet between the two of them. So that's the total.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, planner. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. Is that better?
Yes, that's much better.
So the outdoor dining space totals 182 square feet.
And the dimensions though, how far off the face of the building is it? How far does it project into the, what's perceived as the public area?
I have a follow-up on that question. In the drawing A110, it looks like the dining will be directly under the awning so that it wouldn't go beyond the awning. Is that correct?
That's correct. It is directly underneath the awning. And I'm trying to pull up the plan here that shows.
I can pull that up for you.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, to clarify, yes, the dining is directly under the awnings on both sides. It does not go beyond the awning on either side.
Are you asking about circulation? Board
Yeah,
member?
well, I'm going to get to that, but so that's why I'm asking these questions. When I was out yesterday, I measured the awning at approximately 6 feet off the building. And I'm seeing on your drawing here, my colleagues are pointing out on sheet A110 that it's dimensioned at about 7 feet 6 inches is the outdoor dining seating area.
Depending on where you measured it from.
I'll let Jim speak to
Sure,
this a little bit, but I believe we went out and did field verification as well. And you can actually see here in this specific, on this awning drawing, that it looks like 7.2 plus 11 inches. So it's approximately a little over 8 feet deep, the awnings from the facade.
Okay, thank you. And then is there any definition or description of what the actual lease area is? As I understand it, in the shopping center, the storefront tenant is sort of considered to be leasing a certain amount of space in front of the store. I think that's how it works. What is that dimension of that space?
My name is James Rizzo with Rizzo Associates, RIZZO. And I did do field measurements, and my understanding is the furthest point, it's a curved element. So the furthest point is correct when Jennifer said it was, I can't see my screen, unfortunately. Jen, did you say 8 feet?
Correct.
Yes, so it curves at that point, and it's my understanding that our lease line goes directly under there in a square format, so it doesn't follow the curve. It follows the furthest point from the facade.
And do you know what is that furthest point from the facade, dimension-wise? 8 feet?
8 feet.
Okay, fine. So that I found on sheet G101 is the thing I'm questioning or just wanting to understand, where it says space 751C reference. There's some sort of reference to some sort of space. I'm just trying to understand what that is. What does that mean? Yeah, right there. What does that mean? Right where your cursor is on the screen. No. I just want to know what is space 750 right there. What is?
So I think that there was a discrepancy in the number of the unit at one point, but that is our unit.
I see. Okay, so it's just an internal reference.
Yeah, it's internal reference to the lease that we had received from Simon.
Okay, thanks. I've taken enough time with questions. Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question to the staff. So looking at the sheet G101, the path of the travel, there are diagrams show like the 8 feet wide path of. There are food stands and also the carts that putting there. Actually, it's on the way of the path of the travel, and currently actually it's outside the boundary of the awning. And what we can see from the drawing, even the current drawing shows, the diagram shows it cut the corner of the awning. So I wanted to know from the staff whether it is acceptable, if there is, well, like the cart and the food stand, they're all movable stuff. So is it okay to meet the code for the circulation requirement?
So you're asking about an adjacent tenant, is that
Yeah,
correct?
Right.
Okay, so I think on the diagram that you're seeing here, you are seeing tenant spaces marked out, but really we'd have to go back to the planning permits for that particular business to find out what areas they were allowed to use. But in general, we are trying to keep open this 8-foot wide walking space so that people can come in and out of the shopping center, walk around comfortably, those sorts of things.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the applicant doesn't need to shrink their outdoors dining space. That's my point, to keep the circulation.
Excuse me, Board Member Chen, I can answer this question for you. When we came through previously on another project redeveloping this area, we did have those adjacent tenants place brass caps or delineation markers in the ground that gives an extent of their movable carts, their food carts in that area to help maintain this clear path of travel.
Okay, thank you.
More questions?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Medina, could you put up the photo?
Yeah, just a moment.
Okay. I think that, excuse me, Mr. Bolte had really answered, questioned exactly the same kind of items that I was concerned about. But looking rather closely at the corner between Taro and the areas which are going to be projecting, I think the next slide might be a little better. Medina, is there another slide there? Photo? Oop. Oh, okay, yeah. So, you know, the building takes a break at that point, and the neighboring building then has its entry right at that point as well. The outdoor furniture is a bit distant from that, so there's a bit more room between the doorway and the furniture that's outside. But the fact that this is a rectangular extension, and if you look closely at the floor plan, it gets to be somewhat restrictive of the neighboring door. So, okay, so this is another issue. I would like to go back because this doesn't affect what we're talking about now. So I'm wondering if you've taken into consideration exactly the movement pattern, and does the neighbor know exactly how far out the sitting area is going to be relative to the passageway into the neighboring retailer? I don't know, does the shopping center want to answer that one?
If I may, this is Richard Wessels with Simon Property Group. Spelling of the name is RICHARDWESSELLS. And I'm Senior Tenant Coordinator for Simon Property Group, who handles Stanford Shopping Center. The adjacency of this exterior seating area is already defined within the GFA of the overall shopping center, with this as allowable exterior seating area. And there are no implications with the adjacent tenant, since it is permitted as per the overall shopping center.
And are the neighboring people informed on this at this moment?
They are aware of this new restaurant coming in, yes.
Excuse me, and the detail of exactly where the seating would be outside?
I can share that with them, but they have no, yes, we will share that with them. But as of right now, I cannot confirm that they've actually seen it.
Okay, well, to me, it's a kind of an issue,
Whose question,
passage
Judy?
issue, not just a sort of the legal issue. Maybe there would be some discussion and some notification to the neighbors that this is exactly where it's going to be. Perhaps even there be some form of accommodation if there is a problem there. It just seems to me that the passage is rather critical at that point when there is a
Just questions.
change in direction of the whole building. So I'm just pointing it out that sort of in order to make sure that there is no future conflict at that location. Seems to me you could approach that. I understand there's lease issues, but sometimes those things are fudged a little bit to make it more convenient.
Any more questions?
No.
Questions?
I have a
That's
pretty
statement rather than a
minor question. Pretty minor question. With the bifolding doors to the exterior, are they split in the middle and they go 2 panels to each side? And then sort of a adjacent question to that is, are you able to access these front dining areas from the entryway, like before you step into the restaurant? So you're able to walk straight to the side and then straight to the exterior dining spaces? Does that question make sense? Like before you enter the restaurant, can you turn right or left and enter those exterior dining space areas?
Jim, do you want to answer that or should I?
If the
You
architect
I
can
mean,
show the site
you know,
plan.
There's some planters there that will pretty much be fixed most of the time. They'll be super heavy, but yes, I believe that you can access the space from the sidewalk there.
So just to confirm, you do not need to enter the restaurant to access those outdoor dining, eating areas.
Correct.
Okay. And so those bifolding doors, there's going to be 2 panels to the right and 2 panels to the left of each opening. So you would sort of have to walk around the end of the panel to get into that dining from the entry space.
I can speak a little to the circulation if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
So the idea is that, when a patron comes to the restaurant, they will come in through the entry. And that's when we've tried really hard to make that a really special place. So people know as far as a wayfinding path goes, like that they've arrived to the correct space. And then when you walk in, they'll end up at the hostess station. So while people would likely eat in the exterior spaces and potentially leave through the open space over here, they won't actually enter the dining room through the exterior seating portion. They'd come in, they'd be walked to the seat, and then potentially the hostess would, for circulation purposes, would walk them out to sit them at the space closest to the metal barrier, but they wouldn't actually be entering the restaurant space through these openings. Does that answer your question?
Yes, more or less. And then for the conditions of when it's a cold day, rainy day, are you just going to not use the outdoor dining, or is it going to be closed off? I guess I just am sort of curious how that would work in wintertime versus summertime.
Sure.
Very clear.
Amir, I could let you speak to operations, and I'll hop in to say we expect that when it's a cold, windy day, that they would have the doors closed, and then the exterior seating and tables would still be out there just exposed to the elements, but closed off and likely no one occupying those tables and chairs. Amir, I'll let you speak.
Yeah, I mean, I unless there's like a request during winter to be specifically sat outside, the area would likely be closed. Still presentable, but it's more of a customer preference to sit out there during winter. So I think that's probably the extent that. Obviously, customer preference comes first. So if they want to sit out there in the rain, then we would let them sit out there in the rain. But I think we'd like it. We'd probably keep it closed.
And last question: is there any intent for any type of outdoor space heating in that area?
Yes.
Did I miss it in the drawings? Perfect. All right, that's it. Those are all my questions. Thanks very much.
Okay, I had a quick question. On the material board, we have two wood finishes, and I just wanted to confirm, I think the wood finish on this one is the wood that's on the facade. But I just wanted to confirm where this wood goes. Yes. The wood in the bottom.
Left. The bottom left is the wood for and this again is just a color example, but that's the tabletop wood. So the tabletop wood will be the same from the interior out to the exterior and such. So I just wanted to make sure, because that's something that we will perceive on the exterior, that warmth and that wood. Wanted to make sure that you guys saw that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And I just want to remind my fellow board members that this part of the meeting is just questions only, no statements. Thank you. Okay. Any more questions? Doesn't look like any. All right, so thank you to the applicant. I think we'll bring this back to the board. And who would like to go first? Go ahead.
Thank you. Overall, I think it's a beautiful palette of materials. Seems to fit the restaurant design intent wonderfully. Rich, high quality, looks lovely. So I just have two comments on the materials. I think we could probably need to see them at a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee level. But one is that I'd really think that the wood slats outside need to be solid wood, and you really need to be careful with the finish on them. And it's not, I don't think, specified clearly enough in the finish schedule that they're solid wood and what that epoxy finish is. Even with that, I will caution the designers or the owners that they're likely within a year or two to look sort of shabby. And that's our goal, is to not have it look that way. But I just don't know what else you can do when you finish clear wood and put it in the sunshine and the rain. It's a tough challenge, but it certainly looks lovely now, and I'm willing to let it run through. The shopping center has a lot of places like that, but I think we should do everything we can to get it specified tightly. The second one is, again, on regarding the metal pattern on the railing. What you're showing in the rendering looks lovely, and I can easily support that, but I'd like to see that defined in the drawings so that it's clear what it's going to be. The diamond shaped etching would not be so attractive. So with that, I'll come to my big concern, which is the outdoor dining space. Standing out there the other day, the overhang looked closer to 6 feet to me. Now I'm just pacing it out, but I doubt it's 7.5 feet. But again, I wonder if we could just maybe through the board to send that back to a subcommittee to have it verified. If the seating is indeed just under the overhang, it's fine. If it ends up sticking out 7.5 feet, I think it is too tight for a number of reasons. Right now, at least, Segona's Market consistently exceeds their lease area, and that would leave the pathway down to about 5 feet at a major entrance into the shopping center. We've been through this with the Pacific Catch restaurant. We've established a guideline that you need to have a minimum of 8 feet, 100% clear pedestrian pathway in the shopping center. We insisted on that successfully, I feel, at the Pacific Catch restaurant, and I think the standard should be the same here. Regardless of the lease areas, it's really important that keep a clear pathway in. So either Segona's has to be enforced more carefully, or this restaurant has to somehow cut back their tables. And to me, it's not really relevant what the lease area is. That's just a clear safety issue, a functionality issue for the shopping center. So somehow that 8-foot clearance has to be maintained consistently. Secondly, I think Board Member Hirsch was pointing out that the entrance to the adjacent tenant, that door is not where it's shown on the plan. It's closer to that inside corner. And when you stick these tables out with the 42-inch metal railing, you've basically blocked off their door. And again, there's a functionality requirement we have to make, and I don't think that's met with this proposed arrangement. What I think would be worth considering is to have an asymmetric table arrangement. On the left, adjacent to Pacific Catch, you could have a much deeper outdoor area because of the curved patio, and Pacific Catch has a outdoor patio area that's got to be 14 or 15 feet. You could have more tables on that side and perhaps one row of tables on the other side where the passageway is tight and where your neighbor's door is going to be blocked otherwise. So I would encourage you to think about a different seating arrangement that might be more functional for the walking in the shopping center. So that's my major concern with this project, is that we keep the functionality of the pedestrian pathway. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Balte. Who'd like to go next? Board Member Chen?
And in general, I'm in favor of the elevation design. The materials looks good, and we want to make sure that it is the solid wood instead of the wood veneer, which you're showing on the material board. And my concern is similar to what Boardman Bolte just made, is about the safety issue, the circulation thing. I think provide the outdoor dining is really good experience for the diner, and but it is important we know how far you can go away from the exterior wall, because we want to keep the 8-foot wide circulation, and also I agree. Maybe you need to reconsider the seating layout so that you can fit the seating area appropriately. And also on the site plan, all your dimensions are labeled as verified in field. So I hope in next submission you will have more accurate dimension showing there instead of everything just very broad. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Rosenberg?
Thank you. Yeah, my comments are actually pretty small. I think that this is a beautiful project. I think you've done a nice job with the facade. I actually think it's going to be quite an interesting upgrade. We are seeing a lot of white designs these days at Stanford Shopping Center, and this is sort of cohesive with that theme. However, I appreciate the vibrancy of the green door, the mosaic tile flooring. I would agree with Board Member Balte that railing, the metal die cut railing, really needs to be a more unique pattern closer to the rendering. I think that the triangular suggestion of a railing in the drawings is not going to be enough. So as long as you stay closer to the rendering, I think that'll be fine. I might disagree with my colleagues here a little bit in terms of this circulation. I think that if you are allowed the space, then you should be allowed to build the space. If a neighboring adjacent property has expanded beyond their zone, this property should not be penalized for someone else's misstep. So I think as long as they are being consistent with what's allowed in the parcel, I am less concerned about whether that's there. Now, to be clear, I do think that 8-foot path circulation must be maintained. However, if someone else is in violation, they need to be addressing that, not these people. These people have their limits. They should be allowed to build to their own limits, regardless of what's going on with someone else's, I'm going to say, misstep. I also am noticing on sheet A120, it looks like the corner from the adjacent property across the way is actually at the area where there are no dining tables. It seems to be more towards the entrance area. So again, I'm a little bit less concerned with the circulation pathing than maybe some of my colleagues are. Now, however, I do agree with their points, and they are clearly well taken, that the safety is a concern. There's always the possibility that these outdoor dinings could be chamfered at the corners, right? Just to make sure that neighboring property with their door has more access. I do think being a respectable neighbor to your, the restaurant right next door is important. And so if you can make a minor adjustment to make sure that door is more respected and that people can get into that noodle house a little bit better, I think that's great. I don't necessarily know if this should be an ad hoc committee to sort of review the dining spaces one more time. I think the restaurant itself is lovely. I think that the facade materials are lovely. It's just the question of the boundaries of this exterior dining. And I think that is not something that should require a full second review. I think that that's something that could be done in an ad hoc meeting. So my 2 cents on that. Thank you for your time. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hirsch.
Well, this is what happens when you come at the end of a session like this, and everybody else has stolen your thunder. What really got me excited in this presentation, because it is going to be a beautiful store, and it's part of what is the most in my mind anyhow, the most exciting entry into the whole shopping center. It's a really tight little patio, and just having all these eateries and food issues happening right there. It's my preferred location to enter the shopping center every time I go. So you're in a great spot there. So good luck to you. And also the food is a good choice in that location, I'm sure. So we have tea, and we have Japanese food, and we have fish, and now hummus. The railing issue was sort of my concern from the beginning, but Chair Bolte has, Commissioner Bolte has stated it pretty clearly that it's going to be different than what was shown originally and on the drawing. So it would have been helpful if we had a more advanced design for that railing from the beginning. And also if somehow the interior tile work, which is really spectacular, would have been expressed a little more directly to us. Maybe we should open up the window again outside to have the materials detail turned over to us a little bit earlier, so that we know exactly what's coming. But the idea of the doorways and the planters and the detail of the interior tile work, it really is very significant to this project, because that's what you're going to look at when you come to the corner there. I myself was a little concerned about the oversimplistic kind of idea of the top of the building, hoping that perhaps up on those panels there might be something more decorative that followed some of the style kind of other places. Even, for example, the fish restaurant, as you look up above, it has textures and whatnot that are more the feeling of the restaurant itself. So, however, the idea of sort of the Mediterranean idea here of keeping it pure and keeping it very lightweight and sort of referencing the bright sunlight of that part of the Mediterranean, which I haven't gotten to Turkey, but at Greece, at least next door, you get that same kind of feeling. And I think that's really pretty impressive that it's going to be. The textures will be close to the floor and the doorway and the sides of the door. So I certainly can accept it as a decision-making process here and keeping the top simple. I'm very concerned, as I mentioned earlier, about the neighboring entry. Their entry is where it is. So if in fact there can be some recognition of that issue by simply chamfering the corner to make sure that, I think it's worth your considering, because yes, you have a lease, and Commissioner Bolte suggested consider the whole area more carefully, see if you can work your chair placements in some way. It seems to me that the description of getting your food and going to the outdoor isn't quite working yet as well. Because if you go through the door, you look at the way the furniture is laid out in the outside space. If somebody is sitting down a little closer to the person behind them, there's hardly room to get through from the inside to the sitting area. Look at your furniture layout at that point and see if you don't agree that it could be improved. Other than that, what concerned me a little bit is, and what I don't see here, is dealing with the actual ground surface where there's a drainage piece going across the front of the store. And we haven't really looked at the paving issues there. I'm not quite sure how that's all going to work, but I hope. It's just not very attractive with the drainage trough going through there. But, I don't know quite what you do there. But I do think it's an issue to be addressed. I think that There are just a few issues here to take us through to finals on this one, but I do still think that, as previously was mentioned, that one other session, ad hoc meeting, would be a good idea for some of the issues that are still remaining on the table here. But thank you very much, and it's going to be an exciting addition to that wonderful entry to the shopping center.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hirsch. You learned that when you're chair, all of the thunder gets stolen, but then you can catch it. So it's exciting anyway. So yes, thank you so much for this application. Really appreciate a lot of the design work that's going in here. I agree with my fellow board members that this will be a really great addition. Similar to kind of what's been discussed, I would agree that seeing an elevation of what that railing pattern is, and even the underside, we have sort of a glimpse of the underside of the RCP on sheet A120 about what that perforated canopy would look like, but it looks really detailed and it looks really lovely. And I'm curious just to see it bigger. But yeah, so I think I'll agree that seeing the railing at an ad hoc committee makes sense. As far as circulation goes, my main concern about the adjacent tenant is just if there is adequate accessible access to that door. I think if it were able to be demonstrated that that adjacent tenant can have accessible access to their door, I would not object to the current configuration as is. I think these drawings, it's a simple sort of thing to sort of see if there is, I think, is it 44 inches wheelchair access in there. So I'd be interested in ensuring that is maintained for that tenant. And other than that, I think I have no other exceptions or objections to the proposal as is. I think it'll be really nice. Okay, so would somebody like to make a motion or speak more?
Through the chair, I wonder if it's possible to have the applicant address our concerns about the seating and stuff, and see what they're willing or see what they think about our concerns before we stipulate anything, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'd be open to that. Would the applicant like to talk about the seating issue? I know we've all sort of touched on it briefly. Typically, we don't usually allow that, but given that we're working together here, are there any thoughts on some of the items that we brought up regarding the pinch point to the neighbor to the left, and also the 8-foot clear?
Amir, do you want to speak to this or might I?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
You look
So
ready.
a couple of things I don't know if what I'm allowed to address or what I'm not, but a couple of things that I just wanted to make mention of. For that pinch point, I think, and again, I'm speaking for the owner, I can sideline with them as well, but I think that to chamfer that corner to provide a nice, easy access to the neighboring properties seems like a reasonable modification. And Amir, I'll make sure that you concur with that. And I think in that case, we potentially lose a seat, maybe 2 seats on our exterior seating. And then to speak to the railing, we're more than happy to provide a detail of that die cut metal. Yeah, and then a couple other things I wanted to just say is if you look at the RCP, to speak to some of the patterning and such that was noted, there's a couple of things happening. So when we walked around the center, we thought there's a lot of over visual stimulation. So part of what we're trying to bring when you go to the Mediterranean, there's this refreshing breath, there's just breathing room. And so we're trying to bring that breathing room into this space. But then also making sure that we're not neglecting some of the really beautiful ornate patterns and such. So if you look at the RCP, and the awning pattern is actually of the Turkish rug pattern. So we're trying to bring in these things in a really discreet but authentic way.
Is that,
Well, would it be possible to get maybe a representative from the shopping mall even to, I'm bringing this up because we went through this at incredible detail in the Pacific Catch restaurant. And it seems to me a lot of it is because Segona's consistently exceeds their lease area. In this case, it seems like the tenant to the right, the Noodle House, is also somehow setting up a design that brings into question what Kendra was raising about. Each tenant should have the right to use their full lease area, but not exceed it. What does the shopping mall do to enforce these things so that the city gets an 8-foot clear space?
but
Because this
also
is twice now that it
accessible
seems that Segona's exceeds their lease area. Now it seems like the Noodle House has set up a situation where somebody else has to compromise, lose 2 seats in their restaurant. What are you guys doing about that?
Afternoon again, this is Richard Wessels with Simon Property Group, and I have been in communication again with mall management, and we stay on a constant basis with Segona's, but we'll address that again today and make sure that they do keep within the confines that were defined as part of the marketplace redevelopment. And we will make sure it's a standard practice to make sure that they stay within those confines going forward. And then also with the noodle bar adjacent to hummus is their freestanding tables and chairs that they have out in the common area, which they're not permitted to have by their lease. So those will be taken out as well.
Okay, I don't necessarily want an exhaustive answer as much as I want the board to hear. It just seems unfair for a new tenant who is leasing space not to be able to use it. At the same time, we have to find functionality here. It has to work for everybody.
Understood.
So I don't know where we're going to go with it exactly. Chair,
May I just say something really quickly? My understanding from Joyce, part of Rizzo Associates, is that they did go out and measure the distance of the neighboring door, and you can see it a little bit here in this exhibit on sheet A200, and you can see that this is essentially the configuration. So this doesn't impede that. While I agree with you, it looks like it in plan and some of the site plans. This is, I guess, where the door is in the neighboring restaurant.
Thank you. That was actually very helpful.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in and just say this drawing right here on A200, it does make me less concerned. Yeah, so the photo looks much closer and the physicality of it looks much closer. The drawing does make it appear farther and more relief between the two, but in person it does look quite a bit closer. So just some verification on that might be helpful.
Did you say that this drawing was made from field verification?
Jim,
Correct.
thanks.
So I think if you'd like, this is certainly something that staff can verify as part of building permits or something of that nature, if we'd like to go that direction.
Okay.
I think we can pick it up with an ad hoc committee, but could I throw one other crazy idea out there?
Sure.
This is to the designer, but I keep thinking about the stained white oak, which is what we use in all our Northern California projects, and it looks great. But this is a Mediterranean restaurant. What if you used an unfinished olive wood or Mediterranean pine instead and let it weather? Might be something that would just go just as well with your palette and be less of a maintenance issue. I'm not saying we want in any way to stipulate that, but I'm throwing it as an idea. I just can't help thinking that way. So
I love it.
if it's something you would consider, I'd like to see that we leave the option up to you to redesign it as you like. The oak is certainly okay. There's no problem.
Yeah.
But it is so Northern California.
I agree. Oh, I think part of the reason we were stipulating the oak is just the supply chain issues that we're seeing, and that's one material that we can get open with. But I love that idea. So it'd be fun to look into. I'd be happy to.
Okay. So yeah, Kendra, would you like?
So I'd like to move that we recommend approval of this project as presented with the following items to return to an ad hoc committee. Item 1 would be a detailed drawing of the metal guardrail and ceiling pattern, or drawing or a detailed specification. Item 2 would be a specification of the wood slats on the exterior, including the finish. And those should, under all circumstances, be solid wood. And item 3 is an accurate drawing of the lease area in front of this shop, of the lease area of the adjacent tenant to the right and left and across the way of Segona's, all demonstrating that you'll have a minimum 8-foot clear passageway through the shopping center. That's the only things I want to put at the ad hoc committee, nothing to do with the neighbor adjacent. So that's my motion, those 3 items.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Balte, second by Chen. Can I offer a friendly amendment?
Please.
That in the accurate drawing of the site plan, that the neighboring door is included to ensure accessible access to the neighboring tenant.
Absolutely. The intent is that the accurate site plan needs to show not only your project, but the adjacencies, how they're impacted. So I would expect to see clearly what Segona's is doing, and then to the door to the right and left. But I want to be clear that our intention is not to limit you because a neighbor has placed a door in an inappropriate place. I just want to see you demonstrate that everything's going to function. So I don't know.
Does the second approve of the friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Would anybody like to speak to the motion?
I'd like to, yes. I don't know if it's proven that the neighbor has put this door in a location that is in some way inappropriate, because we don't know. We haven't studied that. It hasn't been a part of our presentation today. So I don't think we should make that kind of assumption in language here that they, in speaking about it, that they're somehow at fault here. I don't see that they are necessarily at fault. They're perhaps abiding by their lease arrangement, and the doorway may in fact be in an appropriate location. So it's not appropriate for us to opine about whether or not they are they are living up to their lease arrangement. So I think we should be allowed to ask for that. We are still allowed to talk about access to or learn about what this particular application is hoping to do relative to the neighbor's door. A part of your motion, hopefully.
Absolutely. Let me offer my intent behind this. The intent is that the staff will now have the information to assess whether any sort of access codes or safety issues are impacted for any of the tenants in the shopping center. And if this project were to cause an access issue with the neighboring business, then that would have to be addressed somehow. I don't think the board should stipulate what the solution is, but I've got to think that if something they do makes it impossible to get a wheelchair in a neighboring business, that's a clear issue that staff would have to deal with. I don't think, I agree with you, Board Member Hirsch. I think what you're saying, that we shouldn't be telling them what to do, especially without information. But I just want to be sure that the issue is addressed.
So if I may, I think what I'm hearing is that we have established the 8-foot clear space on the sort of common pathways, correct? But the entrance to a business, I don't believe we were thinking that that had to be 8 feet. That just has to be ADA accessible, which is closer to the 44 inches. Okay, thank you.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion. And would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Nope. All right, shall we take a vote?
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes,
Motion carries 5-0.
thank you. Oh, yes, who would like to be on the subcommittee or the ad hoc committee? Any volunteers? Vice,
Happy to.
okay,
I love to.
okay. So Chen and Rosenberg on the ad hoc committee. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to the applicant.
Chair Thompson, board members, thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. All right. Are we all feeling good? Should we keep going? Or do we want, what time is it? Okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break. We'll be back at 9:45. Ready to begin? All righty, we good to resume? Great. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. We're doing really great for time. I'll just make that note. All righty, so our next item is 1700 Embarcadero Road. This is a consideration of a site and design review, design enhance exception and off-street loading space modification to allow demolition of a vacant restaurant and the construction of a new 2-story, 31,000 square foot automobile dealership. Disclosures.
I visited the site.
Yes, I actually went out and really explored the Bay Trail carefully, rode up and down to try to understand how this project relates to that. And I think it really does relate to the Bay Trail. It's right in the middle of it.
Yes, I visited the site early this week.
Yes,
You want to put your mic on?
visited the site and was focused on the perimeter trees and the perimeter of the site in particular in this visit to it. But of course, we've been there previously a few times. Thank you.
I also visited the site and I've biked around there as well. Okay, I will hand it over to staff.
Yes, thank you. Sheldon Ossing, Principal Planner. Good to see you. It's been a couple of years since I've been in this chamber giving a presentation, so I'm just trying to adjust to the sensory and past couple of years, like motioning my kids to get out of the way, so it's a little bit different. And I noticed that we have a couple of new board members here since the last time I presented, so I'll try to be a little sensitive to some of the background information. This is hearing number 16 for this site for an automobile dealership, so there's a lot of history and context. So I'll try to slow it down where need be, but it's easy to take for granted all of that information. So we have a project overview about the project itself, then discussion about some of the project inconsistencies that we're trying to get some feedback from the board, some of the next steps and recommendations. So as I mentioned, a number of public hearings on the site, even some before the 16 that I mentioned way back between the restaurant and the change in the zoning to allow for a hotel. So that was sort of that first image on the left that was envisioned originally that never came through fruition. The property sold, then came the first iteration of the Mercedes-Benz dealership. So that dealership did take full advantage of the CS district, which is more of a commercial district, a height limit of 50 feet. So that time when it went to the council, the council did not approve the project because of the mass and the height. So that project never went forward. The property got sold and then moved on to the image on the right. The property next door to Audi also became part of the project. So it ended up being a kind of bigger building over more area, although not as tall, but at the same time, it had very innovative inventory storage system on the inside of the building. So that was appreciated, but it presented some challenges. This site also had incorporated a multi-use bike path there at the corner, because acknowledging that there is a gap in the bicycle system there. And then we come to this project where it was a subject of a preliminary ARB back in 2021, and go over that a little bit more in this presentation. So the site is a CS zoned. The D is a site and design because it is located in the Bay area, the Baylands Reserve area, as well as an AD, which is automobile dealership combining district that affords some different zoning and development standards because of auto use is more unique type of use. As mentioned, it's a demolished existing vacant restaurant building and redevelop the site with a 2-story auto dealership. The site is approximately 2.5 acres. Some of the surrounding uses include office, as well as there are 2 existing dealerships adjacent to the site on Embarcadero Road. It is within the Baylands near some trails and also Highway 101. So I think it's important here just to kind of take a step back. 5,000, literally, this is a 5,000 elevation photo of the site to understand kind of what's going on in this area, what's been sort of the challenges, the opportunities in this site. And this is the site here by with the pin. It's at this intersection of Embarcadero Road and East Bayshore. It's a congested intersection. Reason being, there's kind of a dead end here to get to this major employment center, as well as you're near this interchange with 101 that serves Embarcadero Road and Oregon Expressway. In terms of just staying on that with transportation, you do have this crossing that goes over, bicycle crossing goes over the freeway. It links up here with East Bayshore Road. There's some trailheads that lead to the Baylands at Fabian as well as Bayshore. And then as you go towards the intersection of Embarcadero Road, there's a bike lane, but then drops off right as property. And the whole frontage of the property does not include that that bike lane. So it does become challenging for bicyclists, especially if they're trying to continue on to Gang Road, which is an extension to get to the Bay Trail. Some other things to consider, this property and the Audi property next door are the only properties that are zone CS. So those properties per the zoning code kind of require you to have a setback that's right up to the street. It's more like El Camino Real. But as you look around in the area, you see the setbacks are much greater. So it's like the Stanford Eye Clinic Institute, a lot of those other buildings area, just more industrial nature, their setbacks are greater. What's also forcing this site to have a greater setback is that along East Bayshore Road, there are just about 80 feet worth of easements that need to deal with overhead utility lines for overhead PG&E high transmission line. There's a tower right there at the corner, as well as underground. There's easements for underground utilities. So those are things that are some constraints for this site and this area. So requests for the project are for the site and design, and that process requires a stop here at the ARB as well as the PTC and the City Council. There's a request for a design enhancement exception. That is again to the setback for the build-to setbacks here along this East Bayshore Road, and then as well as for Embarcadero Road. We'll talk more about that. The dealership itself is about 31,000 square feet. It's a 0.29 FAR, so that's well below the threshold there, 0.6 FAR. We also don't count the service drive aisle covering per code. So that's an exemption to the floor area. And this is a 26-foot tall building. There's one element, I think it's for a sign here along Embarcadero Road, and that's up to, I believe, 32 feet. So as there was a preliminary review of this application back in 2021, you can see the upper left there, that was what was presented at that hearing. Some of the direction and comments received from the ARB was to work with staff regarding the multi-use path. Consider shifting the building away from Bayshore so that trees and the multi-use pathway could be accommodated. Modulate the massing more to provide more variation along the elevations. Need to be consistent with the Baylands guidelines. Wrap the green wall around the face of the office, to face the office building, and ensure the car wash has no negative acoustic effects, and ensure inventory is not offloaded onto traffic lanes. And I think the applicant has mostly addressed these issues, and in his presentation, he'll also go into more detail about that. So this is the west elevation that faces East Bayshore Road, and you can see in these imagery, this and as well as along Embarcadero Road, the applicants provided a little more variation material and color for these elevations, including the glass, which is mostly the showroom element. You've got some wood that's near the service drive, as well as that green wall that wraps really around the service part of the building. And I've provided a little different renderings here, as well as some cut sheet details of that hanging wall system. So then this is along Embarcadero Road, and the building is kind of at an angle, so it does catch different parts of the elevation, but again, very similar. You've got the metal siding, ribbed metal, some of the glass and the wood that you can see. And you can see that sign elevation element there. And this is the side that faces the Audi building, and you can see there's some metal paneling and there's some stucco. So there's a little less variety in color along this elevation as they are for the other two previous elevations that we just mentioned. And this is the elevation that would face the office building and then more towards the Baylands. If there was a direct view there of it, you can see that they've wrapped that green wall around a bit. And then at the backdrop of that is the rib paneling. And then the stucco is sort of the other part of the building and the car wash. So now I just wanted to talk about some of the inconsistencies in the project that we've identified. So these things in and of themselves are probably maybe a little more minor, but cumulatively, they are some issues that we need to address, that whether or not we can make the findings to support the project. So we just need some feedback from the board on these issues. So the first one to go over is loading spaces. What's required are 2 loading spaces. They provided one here, follow my cursor in the driveway. This driveway actually connects with the adjacent Audi. So with the loading spaces, it's not only just a quantifying, it's also there's a dimensional aspect to it that they need to meet. So they do meet the dimensional aspect on that. And that seems to be okay. The second one that is right in front of the car wash, that one, if it's placed there, it does meet the dimensional requirements, but then you have, and what you're left with is insufficient drive aisle width. So that is a concern. In the code, we are allowed to have a waiver or modification of that space. So that's a potential remedy. Another remedy could be to redesign the project to eliminate some parking. So therefore there is sufficient space for that drive aisle. Another issue that we've identified is parking lot shading. In the code is a 50% shading requirement at 15 years maturity for the trees. So this exhibit here is from the plans, and it identifies that they are only meeting 38%. So some of what's really compounding this is that unlike the other previous project where they've had their inventory on the inside of the building, this is a more traditional type of dealership where the inventory is on the outside on the surface parking lot. So how they address that is by doing tandem parking. So the inventory is along the outside of the perimeter, and then their customer parking has direct access to the drive aisle. And you can see if they probably just had one row of parking, it'd be really close at meeting that requirement. So in addition to that, you've got this 80-foot easement here, and there's some constraints with vegetation. PG&E doesn't allow anything over 15 feet. They'll come by, they'll trim those trees to maintain clearance between the tops of the trees and the wires. So potential remedies that we've kind of thought through would be a code amendment to lower that threshold for automobile dealerships, maybe thinking of like offsite planting of trees in the Baylands, maybe perhaps, or a variance acknowledging that they've got this easement here, or a redesign of the project. The other inconsistency is the build-to setbacks I mentioned earlier. This is directly from the CS zoning district. As mentioned, we see that typically along El Camino Real, where you want to see buildings up to the street. So we've got a 50% requirement in the front, which is Embarcadero Road, and 33% of the street side. You definitely cannot meet that with the easement restrictions. So the project has a 0% compliance there. And it kind of makes sense where they want to have the drive aisle along Embarcadero Road. With this type of use, you probably want to internalize as many trips as possible as opposed to having them on the street. So I think some potential remedies here, and we have consistently supported this in the past, has been the design enhancement exception. Others could be a code amendment or a variance. The other issue here is the Baylands master plan compliance. This project is in what is called the private lands area. So most of the site assessment design guidelines and principles really address projects and structures in the reserve itself, but there's a couple of key areas and principles that are specific to this project. And so we would recommend that the project incorporate using the Sandy Hook gray color where appropriate, as well as include some additional modulations of roof eroding, kind of a low and horizontal elements. They're probably pretty close to that already. And then seeking more relationship with the rear of the building through appropriate materials. So we think, as shown in the elevations where Embarcadero Road and East Bay Shore, they've provided more materials, maybe including more of that around the backside of the building. So then we get to the bicycle path. TDM plan is required for this project because it meets the threshold of generating more than 50 peak hour trips. So per the comprehensive plan, the required peak hour reduction is 20% for the site. So because this is an auto-related use, in our experience, it's not going to be able to meet that target. It's not possible to do that. So staff's been working with the applicant on improvements that could create a similar type of reduction benefit. This includes active transportation within the vicinity of the site. So there are regional bike trails, as I mentioned, as well as pathways that lead to major employers, as well as recreation. So this intersection is considered to be very congested and is not safe for cyclists as currently designed. So we did discuss that there is this gap as bicycle network. We would need 10 feet, so 4-foot lanes and 2-foot shoulders to give us a successful transition and path through here to connect to the existing network. So taking the direction from the ARB, from the preliminary meeting, in good faith, staff's met with the applicant many times and brought this issue up. We've even come up with options and alternatives, and each time the applicant has not entertained anything of that sort. So there hasn't been any, I think, coming together on this issue. We totally acknowledge that there are mature trees that exist under these power lines. I think they're Chinese elm trees. And in the past project, there was a trade-off. Those trees were proposed to be removed. Some smaller trees were to put in its place. But I think we're just seeking some feedback and guidance from the board on this issue so we can move forward. The next steps here is we are currently processing environmental documents for the application. Those are in administrative draft right now. So following this hearing, we'll present those to the ARB at the next meeting with the recommendation with the project. So we do request that the ARB provide feedback on the project regarding the loading spaces, the parking lot shading, design enhancement exception for the build out setbacks, the build to setbacks, the Baylands master plan compliance, the bicycle pathway, any other feedback you may have about the overall design. And finally, we recommend the continuation of the project to a date uncertain. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Let's bring it to the applicant. You'll have 10 minutes after the applicant presentation. You'll have 10 minutes and please state and spell your name for the record.
Hello, my name's Eric Iverson, ERIC-IVERSEN. I'm Director of Real Estate with Swickard Automotive Group. We are the owners of the site and have the rights to the Mercedes franchise there. I'm also an avid cyclist and I love trees. So I would like to get that in front. Sheldon knows that very well. We've discussed that very well. I started off my career as a city planner before I got into building things. So I've been involved with this a really long time. As was mentioned by the staff report, there were previous iterations of a Mercedes store of which some of you were involved with at that site. And frankly, when we got involved, I was shocked at the massing of the building. A 50 or 60,000 square foot dealership at that site, I think really just didn't fit. Elevator, cars and elevators, it sounds like a wonderful idea. It's a horrible idea to try to operate a car dealership with cars and elevators and having people jockeying cars around all day. That's not what we want to be doing. We want to be serving our customers. So what we really focused on was right sizing the dealership for the site and for Palo Alto. The purpose of this Mercedes dealership here is what's called an open point, which means it's a new facility to fulfill a gap or a need that's been identified by Mercedes, that there's customers in this area who are driving too far to get vehicles serviced, purchased, whatever the case may be. The other two closest dealers are 11 miles to the north and 16 miles to the south. Otherwise, you're headed over to Fremont, which All of those can be traffic challenges at different times of the day. A couple of things that we did to right size, like I said, it's a 1-story building primarily with a small 2-story section. We've gone from 60,000 square feet down to 32,000 square feet. A lot of that square footage, as I mentioned, was parking, structured parking. A majority of that parking, we have talked about moving off-site, which is very typical for most car dealerships to have off-site parking. And that or storage, parking and storage. And that parking and storage is really primarily, it fluctuates as the market fluctuates. As we have, everybody's read in the newspaper, there are new automobile challenges for providing those now. New inventories are down. So there may be a couple months where actually overall inventories are down and storage is not necessary. And then as inventories go back up, more offsite storage is necessary. So we want to keep as little on site as is actually necessary. A couple of the other changes that were made, I think as staff mentioned, is the car wash was moved away from the property line and moved to be part of the building. So it's farther away. We did talk about the wood elements on the building, and we've expanded the green wall based on the 2021 preliminary meeting. So we took that green wall and wrapped it around the back of the building to add another interesting element back there. As far as adding more articulation to the back of the building, we kept it to a minimal. I'm personally a believer of we want to do as attract as little attention as possible to the back of that building, let it fade away into the horizon. We don't want to make the back of the building more attractive from that perspective of we don't want people to look at it. If anything, we could paint it a color to match the sky. It's the back of the building. It shouldn't draw somebody's eye. The landscaping in front of it should draw your eye. The green wall, other items really should. A couple other items that were mentioned were the parking lot shading. I think that one really is a challenge here. And previous projects were able to meet that 50% threshold, although they did meet it by creating a bigger overall building and locating that parking inside. I personally think it's a trade-off to getting a lower building that better fits with the environment and then not necessarily meeting that full 50%. If that PG&E easement wasn't there, I do think that we would be able to achieve that 50%, but we can't make that go away as much as I think everybody in this room would like it to go away. The building, again, I'm not going to go, I don't think I have enough time to go through the whole, but I think staff did an excellent job going through the specific design elements of the building. I know a question that occurred last time during the preliminary meeting was what happened to the blue and then black Mercedes columns that were along the front of the building in the previous iteration. Mercedes revised their design standards, and those columns are no longer required and prohibited by Mercedes now. So they were a bit of a pasted on element that you saw in lots of Mercedes stores that have been built over the last 10 years. You will not see them anymore as they've revised their design as auto dealers seem to do every 10 years or so. And one of the big issues that's always been discussed, I think, on every project is where are we going to unload vehicles? Loading vehicles is not too much of an issue as we're the business of selling to individuals. There's occasionally vehicles that are taken off site, but the primary issue is what happens with those 9-car haulers that are hauling cars from the port to the site. In our case, from Alabama, actually, is where most Mercedes are made. And that's what the off-site lots are for. On a 2.5-acre site, getting a 9-car hauler on and off a 2.5-acre site is near impossible. It's just not going to happen on a regular basis. Might it happen occasionally? Sure, it's possible. But those vehicles can be up to 90 feet long if they include the long sleeper cabs and all that good stuff. And that's just not made for a 2.5-acre site. If we had 10 or 15 acres, absolutely. There would be that unloading and loading on site. The two loading zones on site are honestly meant for the small 1 and 2 car haulers and the everyday UPS and FedEx trucks that deliver and pick up packages from the store. It's that type of loading and unloading that will occur there. Again, the 9 car haulers, we need to put them off site. Those are cars that are going into inventory. They're not needed on the day they arrive. They have to go through a whole process. So again, on a site that could be 5 miles away, could be 10 miles away, but we don't typically and just can't on a 2.5 acre site unload them directly on site. And the last one, which we did talk significantly about, staff touched on it as well, is the TDM requirement for a bike path. Not necessarily TDM requirement for the bike path, but in lieu of meeting the 20% reduction, which really is not possible, can a bike path be provided on site? Physically, it can be provided on site. As we've talked, there are some significant trade-offs. The easy and obvious one is the trees. We lose the trees along Bayshore, which again, I'm a tree guy. I like urban trees. That's a loss. Could that be mitigated somewhere else? Yes. Of gravest concern from my perspective is whether or not how safe is that type of bike path. You are coming from, as staff said, a bike lane, which is on either side of the street, and going to a 2-way bike path. So to kind of evaluate that, looking at AASHTO, which is our design guidelines that we as a country use to design sidewalks, bike paths, streets throughout the country. They took a look at bicycle paths, sidecar paths, and actually came up with 9 reasons why in an urban environment like this, they're unsafe and why they shouldn't be installed. Don't have necessarily time to hit all 9 of them, but one of the largest ones is the danger of cyclists who are going in the opposite direction of traffic, whether or not it's whether or not they're at an intersection, or in our case, a driveway. A vehicle leaving a driveway is going to typically look to its left when it's turning right. A cyclist coming on a bike path from the right, it's an accident waiting to happen. And that's just not my opinion. That's a direct opinion of AASHTO. They're saying not to do it. The second one is what happens when you get off a 2-lane bike path and reconnect to a bike lane. That leads to 2 things, either a conflict between cars and bicycles, or it leads to then bicycles riding the wrong way on the street. And, I think we've worked the last 20 or 30 years to not do that. So again, I'm a cyclist. As much as it feels like it's an important connection for the city, and it absolutely is an important connection, it's not a safe connection. It's not the way to achieve or to solve the problem. Just the dangers far outweigh the possibilities. Again, from the cyclist perspective, as staff said, there's an existing issue at that intersection. It's not being created by this project. Likely, although, likely the answer to that is traditional on-street bike lanes. Again, that's a city issue. It's a much larger issue than the project itself. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, can go over anything else in detail, but happy to present the project.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is the public comment. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Yes, we have 2 speaker cards. Our first speaker is Arthur Lieberman.
Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes, and please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Art Lieberman, A-R-T, last name Lieberman, L-I-B-E-R-M-A-N. Good morning, Chair Thompson and members of the board. So I am Vice Chair of PAYBACK, the city's pedestrian and bicycle advisory committee. I presided at the PAYBACK meeting on April 5th as our chair, Penny Elson, was traveling when Payback members discussed this proposed development. The members of Payback voiced unanimous support for a multi-user path that would connect the bicycle lane on East Bay Shore to Gang Road via the signalized intersection on Embarcadero. I want to underline the comments in the staff report about the absence of a multi-user path in this proposal, even though the previous applicant had agreed to one. And I urge that you reject this project and any proposed project on this site that does not include a multi-user pathway. Such a multi-use pathway will close the gap in the city's planned bicycle network and provide a safer alternative for cyclists. Mayor Burt has said in response to questions about multi-user paths on private property that once private property is developed, such property is, quote, not available, unquote, for creating a multi-user path. So now is the time for the city of Palo Alto to obtain a concession from the developer to create a public multi-user path in return for permission to redevelop the property. Now, let me tell you another reason, one reason why a multi-user path is necessary on this property, as board member Balte referred to in this beginning, which is to step back and take a wider view of where this property is in context. The Bay Trail, this is a map of the Bay Trail. Many of you know about the Bay Trail. It's a multi-use, multi-city bicycle route, and 1700 Embarcadero creates a gap in the Palo Alto section of the Bay Trail. I gave you some figures which I've made, which showed you first a map of the Bay Trail with an inset of the Embarcadero section of the trail. Adding a multi-user path at this site would close that gap. And the second figure shows the Palo Alto Embarcadero section of the Bay Trail with this 1700 Embarcadero property superimposed. So there is a bicycle lane on the East Bay Shore side, but it stops right at that property line. And now there are no bicycle lanes at all on this section of Embarcadero. I wouldn't want to ride my bicycle on Embarcadero in that section. Cyclists who want to ride on the Bay Trail from Palo Alto north must detour to Faber Place, as shown on this figure, and then cross Embarcadero in the middle of the block, and then ride back along Embarcadero to reach Gang Road. At our April 5th meeting, members of Payback supported the multi-user path either along the frontage of the 1700 Embarcadero property, crossing a number of driveways, which is shown in green, or to avoid the congested East Bay Shore Embarcadero corner along the rear of the property, and then along the side of the property where it abuts the Audi dealership, which is shown in the figure in magenta.
Mr. Lieberman, your time is up. Could you wrap up your final?
So I'd just like to emphasize that we hope that the dealership would agree to having a multi-user path on its property, and that it would also sell the wonderful Mercedes-Benz e-bikes. I can imagine, the e-bike business is going crazy. And you can imagine what a wonderful opportunity it would be for a Mercedes-Benz dealership to have an e-bike dealership on the Bay Trail. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Penny Elson.
Oh, that feels good, taking that mask off. So you'll have 3 minutes. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Sure. Good morning, first of all, and thank you for your service to our community. I'm Penny Elson, Pennyellson. I am the chair of Payback, and I want to thank my colleague, Vice Chair Lieberman, for his eloquent summary of Payback's position. Though I was traveling for that meeting, I agree with the position that Payback took. Today, however, I will be speaking as an individual because I've now read the staff report and it's given me some thoughts that I'd like to share. On page 14 of the staff report, it says, I quote, "The multi-use path was part of the negotiation for legislative action for rezoning that allows an auto dealership at this location. Council, therefore, expects this project to bridge the pathway gap in keeping with Comp Plan Program L1041 to provide a bicycle pedestrian path adjacent to Embarcadero Road, consistent with the Baylands Master Plan and open space character of the Baylands, subject to federal and state airport regulations. If the legislative action for rezoning to allow an auto dealership was contingent on implementing the multi-use pathway, the path should be built. If it is not, the opportunity to build it or some other facility for bicycles and pedestrians will be lost for the period that this structure is in place. The applicant benefits from the value of that rezoning, which was approved with the understanding that the path would be put in place. Let's couple that with TDM requirements. It seems to me that both the policy and the negotiation for legislative action, together with the current request for a design enhancement exception, gives the city some leverage here. And yet the applicant puts up resistance regarding the path, even as they request a DEE from the city. And to the applicant. Palo Alto people walk and bike in the Baylands. I'm one of them. I also drive. This place is a community treasure, and you, Mercedes and Swickard Auto, can benefit from that. Many hundreds of people walk and bike to the Baylands each day to watch birds, relax, and exercise in nature. People who walk and bike in the Bayland also buy cars. They are your future customers. This is an opportunity to build goodwill with a community that badly needs a safer and more comfortable passage to the Bay Trails for bicyclists of all abilities and skill levels. We will pass by your business each day, appreciating this improvement, and we'll have you to thank for it. You might think of it as a goodwill investment in your new community. I think you know that with high-end purchases like Mercedes, goodwill relationships matter. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you.
Chair Thompson, that concludes public comments for this item.
Okay, thank you. Typically, we allow the applicant an opportunity to respond to public comment. Would the applicant like to take that opportunity?
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it really short at this point. We're interested definitely in hearing what the board may question. I will answer Mr. Lieberman that absolutely we will sell Mercedes electric bicycles at that store. There's no doubt in my mind. While I was sitting there, I verified and got online, and yes, there is a Mercedes electric bicycle, and we carry them at our other Mercedes stores. So we got one checkbox taken care of. I really think to answer both the questions, actually, once again, I used to provide staff support to a bicycle transportation committee in my previous life. We've established that there is a need for a bicycle connection there. There's no doubt in my mind that there's that need in Palo Alto. The question really, and I don't know if it's even a question we can answer today, or even a question that ultimately City Council has to consider, is a separated bike path the answer? And is it safe? And the second one, or is an on-street improvement bike lane the answer? I can't answer that today. I don't know if any of us can answer that. But there's more than one solution to solve the problem here. And that's basically, I'm trying to agree that there is a need for a bicycle connectivity there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions that the board has of staff or the applicant? Questions?
Yes.
Do you have questions, David? Okay.
Yes, Sheldon, one issue I've been looking at here is the fact that this building is surrounded by cars and streets here. And I'm curious as to if there is a kind of an internal circulation pattern for all of those cars. There's the entry off of Embarcadero, and there's an entry and exit, let me say, off of Embarcadero, and an entry exit, I take it, off of Bayshore. And is there any distinction between the patterns of circulation at that point? In other words, do people who are going to visit the building or who are coming for repairs turn immediately right off when they're coming off Embarcadero in order to get to the west side of the building, you know, where the entry is and where the entry is into the service area there, the covered service area. And then they park in that, I assume they, well, if they're there for service, they go into the line into, is there any discussion, have you had any discussion about the passageway and the number of vehicles? And we talk about the amount of over-peak traffic in the area. How about on the site to Mercedes itself?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think this might be a combination of myself and Mr. Iverson chiming in, but as you mentioned, there are two entry points and exit points into the project site, one on East Bay Shore and the other on Embarcadero. And I worked with the applicant to get some on-site directional signage, but I think typically people that enter from any of those sites would be directed to go towards the front of the building on the streets, because the entryway into the service is in the center there. And then they would be queuing inside that part of the building, the covered part. And then I think cars that exit to the rear where when they're done, that can be verified with the applicant. But there would be parking spaces available for customers along the drive aisles, because the ones along the perimeter are the inventory spaces. So any of those open spaces would be for the customers.
So is there a capacity? Did they talk in any way to you, discuss how many cars are going to come on any typical day or a typical day when it's very busy?
Well, if I can't have the applicant address that question, I think that'd be great.
So the way that we operate all of our stores is almost all service appointments are literally appointments. There's very, very limited a spur of the moment, somebody bringing in their car for service. There may be the occasional person, but at the location, usually it's between 90-95% every day are appointment based. And we purposely space those appointments out. We don't want more cars on site than we can handle. So we space those out throughout the day, and we know when customers are coming. And if we have 40, 50 appointments in a day, we make sure they don't all come at 8 a.m. because we can't handle, we don't have enough service riders, and that leads to angry customers. So we set specific appointments just the same as if you were going to the doctor.
Okay,
Any
I'm
more
satisfied with that.
Any more questions?
Yeah, you mentioned that the staging for deliveries happens at the two locations where there are deliveries there. And you mentioned that there's some conflict with the parking in the area there. So there's no exact freedom to park or leave the site in those particular areas. Did you have any discussion? Is there any as to whether or not those spaces would be just permanent during the hours of delivery, or how there is a conflict in that area?
Thank you for the question. So we've identified the issue, gotten to the details about, say, conditions of approval to kind of limit delivery hours or so, but we are seeking some feedback from the ARB and whether or not a waiver of the space maybe is appropriate given the operations of the business, or a modification to any of the dimensions, or maybe furthermore to eliminate some parking to allow for that drive aisle to have adequate access.
Any more questions, David?
Just the pattern of traffic around the building mentions, it's mentioned that it's a one-way system. So you come in and you go out, you come in, let's say on Embarcadero and go out on Bayshore. And that sets up a certain conflict then if we're going to be discussing, as we're likely to be, with the bike path. Have you made any consideration about that? It's not possible really to change any of that traffic pattern within the site, is it?
Well, I think right now, it accommodates two-way traffic. So someone could go kind of either way, depending upon also, there may be some focus from the on-site directional signage to direct people to go a certain way. But I think there's flexibility to work something out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Board Member Chen?
Thank you for your application. I have a few questions to the applicants. One is for the site plan. I noticed on your landscape plan, you planted lots of new trees there, which labeled as ginkgo. They're non-native trees. So I'm wondering whether you have think about some native alternatives.
Regarding the trees, we do have some native trees and there are ginkgo. I don't remember the count of each one exactly. We could definitely entertain other species other than ginkgo. I'm personally a ginkgo fan because of its cleanliness as a tree. But I'm sure we could also find some additional native trees.
Okay. And my second question is about the building materials. So for the reclaimed wood at the service entrance, will you stop it just at the gate of the service entry, or you will bring it into the service drive? Is it on one side or both sides?
Yeah, the intent is to continue it all the way in through the service drive to use it as an architectural flow. You see it on the outside, and it's always a challenge in every service drive to have customers pull all the way through to the end.
Right.
People like to stop as soon as they pull into a building. So I think actually extending that wood all the way to the end encourages people that this is where you pull in. And
so it will be applied only on the right side of the surface.
The left side is all glass.
Okay.
So the left side is open to the showroom.
What is the height of the service drive part area? Is it all the glazing all the way goes all the way to the roof?
On the inside from the service drive to the showroom, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And my third question is about the green wall. So on the elevations, is it accurately represent the dimension of your green wall system, like the horizontal lines where it is going to be? Because I see like the window lines just doesn't align with the windows on the left side where the wood claim windows are.
So it is a green wall system. It's not planting vines and hoping they grow up the wall. So it's actually a system of trays that the trays hang horizontally on the wall, so that if there is dieback, that tray can actually be removed and a new fresh tray can be installed. I would have to investigate if there are multiple sizes available.
Okay.
I did not see.
Then is there a specific reason why the window head doesn't align with each other?
It should.
Okay.
There's not a reason. It should.
Okay.
That's our architect here and our landscape architect over here.
Okay, gotcha. And so I'm wondering there is a second story space behind the green wall area, right? So what's the function of that? Is there any need of any openings there? No windows, no skylight there?
That is purely part storage.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Because the shop requires taller space to lift cars, the
Mhm.
parts are then stored on a mezzanine level.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Any more questions on this side?
Hi, thank you for your application. Thank you for the presentation. I got a couple sort of clarification questions. On page what's labeled 01, there's the red denoted parking spaces. Is that just to simply clarify that those are the show car parking spaces? That's big blue. So they're
Yes.
highlighted in red, but there's no legend. It's
Yes.
just saying that those are the show spaces. Is that correct? Maybe this is a question for staff more than anything else. In terms of this green roof or green tree coverage, has the consideration of a green roof or a living roof ever been considered? And is that something that could be considered to offset that canopy coverage? Sort of putting you on the spot here. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I think maybe this is better for Jody and past applications.
Yeah, so I think per the code, the shading is trees over surface parking lots. I'd have to read the code again if it would pertain to roofs, but we haven't used it that way in the past. So I think we would need a code change for that.
Okay.
But I think, we were open to some idea because, we do realize that obviously, car dealers, this is their business.
Right.
So it's going to be a little bit harder for these types of uses to achieve the 50%. So we're open to, looking at other ideas. The solar carports, is another idea that's been used in other projects.
That's exactly what I was going to ask next. If the goal is the canopy coverage, specifically trees, if it's shading, or if it's sort of green living space, and sort of if we can clarify what that goal is of this 50% coverage, maybe there's a sort of alternate solution or create a solution to get more. If we're just looking for more green living life, a living roof is a great thing to consider. They've already got a living wall. It makes some sense to sort of continue down that vein. But if it really is for shading and coverage, that's a sort of different conversation. So just trying to clarify what that goal, the intent of that goal is. I'm not sure it can be answered right this minute.
Actually, I've just got it. Okay. So the code reads that landscaping within surface parking areas shall include tree plantings designed to result in 50% shading. So it is really surface parking and trees.
Trees and 50%
is the code.
Okay, got it. I'd love to get a little clarification on some of this pathway as well. So the Renzel Trail is the 2-directional trail going along Bayshore, which is the nice bike path. It very clearly sort of stops short, and we have the separation from the Renzel Trail to the street bike path. And I'm just trying to make sure that I'm understanding the concern right now is that this property, there's no room in the street for a bike path. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And so this property is being asked to put a bike path on it, or are they looking to have sort of a continuation of this 2-lane trail?
So we're asking for, and just trying to draw upon what we had approved in the past, is a combination of right of way and private property. So we can accommodate 10 feet, which would be a 4-foot bike
right
lane on both sides and in the shoulder.
Okay.
And have the appropriate transitions.
So to bridge that gap between the Renzel Trail and this property, there would still be just bike lane on East Bayshore. That's the gap in between.
Yeah, there's little parts. So there's the trailhead there along
Yeah.
East Bay Shore. So you can still get onto the street there and then get across the street, of course, to get over the freeway. But then there needs to be that transition from the bike path, the bike lane to a new path. So there needs to be a transition from the street.
Okay, is there any way that if this property does have sort of a continuation of trail 10 feet wide, can you make that a requirement for the next property down the road so that the next properties, that this trail becomes continuous, right? Right now, it's sort of, if this one comes up as a bike path, I feel like we're sort of zigzagging back and forth between different types of bike pathing. And the question would be, is there a way to make sure that this really is a truly continuous path the whole way and make sure that this really is a unified and safe place to go? And And again, I don't know if you can answer that question right now, just sort of forward thinking for the gap between the end of the Renzo Trail, or where it turns, I guess is really what it is, and to where this property begins. Is there a way that we can sort of keep an eye on that for future projects in that area?
Yeah, I think the opportunity is that this property is being redeveloped. So
Exactly.
that's where we are. So the other property adjacent, if that
Have to cross that bridge
redevelops,
when we get
then
there.
we'll look into that.
Okay. I guess I'm sort of out of questions here. In terms of the building itself, I feel like we do need to touch on that. We're very focused on trees and bike paths. And in terms of the building itself, the center portion that is not being counted in the FAR, is that completely open? It looks like the backside has garage doors on it. So it looks like it's enclosed on 3 sides. Is that accurate? Or is it enclosed on all 4 sides? And why is that not counted in the FAR?
So as far as the FAR definition, that portion of the code was changed sometime back to not include these sort of service drives, but they should be open.
Yeah, we can check that a little more.
Yeah, the elevations are
Sure.
just a little unclear. It almost looks like it's a completely solid facade, but and the floor plans, it doesn't quite appear that way. So I'd love just a little bit of clarification as to how open that central breezeway is intended to be, whether it's closed on 3 sides or just the 2 or all 4. I mean, it's just a little bit not clear to me right now.
Yeah, and we can ensure that that meets kind of the intent of the code. So if that needs to be opened up, I think that's shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. And that's it for my questions for now. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a quick question, and then I'll give Board Member Baltic the floor for his questions. Does staff have handy the previous submission that did have the bike pathway solution drafted out?
Let me find it. It's pretty beefy file. So let me try to.
Okay, sorry. I just
Get it
wanted
up.
to give that question early so they have a chance to dig it up.
I was hoping I could get staff to also pull up the site plan, page 01. I just want to understand better the parking count and usage, and that the applicant also have him explain the functionality. But is it possible to get the site plan up on the screen so we can all see it, please? It's the one with the blue poche for the building itself. To the applicant, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to explain how when a customer comes to the store, let's put the site plan up. I've got some other questions first, but I would want to know how a customer gets into the showroom, and then how you get deliveries, how vehicles actually get brought to the site. It's page 01, Sheldon, several back. Perfect, that's it. No, yeah, right there. So what I want to understand is this: the staff report says they're providing 85 parking spaces. When I count the spaces that are here, including all the shaded ones, it's substantially more than that. I think what I'm seeing is that the gray shaded spaces on the right-hand side and across the bottom of the drawing, and the pink shaded ones on the left, are considered display spaces. Therefore, they're not parking spaces. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, they're inventory. The gray spaces are inventory spaces. They're not display space necessarily. The spaces along Bay Shore are both inventory and display. So in terms of display space, those are the ones that we count additional parking for, actually.
So they're required to provide 83 spaces. They are providing 85, is what I'm just doing the counting here. And there's 61 additional display spaces. Is the shading requirement on the required spaces plus the display spaces, or just on the required spaces?
Shading is for the surface area. That's a parking lot. So that's drive aisles, anything that's parking.
So the display spaces are also part of that requirement, right? And it seems to me that it'd be possible to have more trees. It just would be less parking spaces. Am I missing something here?
I think there's a direct relationship between the amount of surface area, which would equate to parking spaces or inventory spaces, and the amount of shading as
Okay,
necessary.
I just want to be sure I'm understanding it because I see 61 additional spaces not being counted towards their requirement. So it seems to me there's lots of latitude in there. If I could ask a question of the applicant, if I'm coming on a Saturday afternoon to talk to somebody about my new car, I've made an appointment, I'm going to come there. And let's say there's 2 or 3 other families already there. So I'm going to drive in and turn right off of Embarcadero. Take me through where I would actually park my car and how would I get into the showroom? How would I meet somebody?
So if you are coming to Car Shop or to talk to a salesperson, you can come off of Embarcadero or off of East Bayshore. The parking spaces are going to be on either up adjacent to the building, or they are going to be adjacent to the inventory parking on Bayshore.
So when I look at this, I see 2 spaces at the top of the drawing on the Embarcadero side. Those are both customer parking spaces?
The 2 spaces I believe you're seeing, those are new car delivery. So that'd be where if you were taking a car, purchasing a car where you'd be picking it up.
Sheldon, do you have could you help me put the cursor on these 2 spaces so we're all seeing the same thing? Along Embarcadero, I see 2 parking spaces off the edge of there. Yeah, just to the left of your cursor. No, to the left. Right there. Those 2 spaces, are those for customers or you're saying those are for delivery?
Those are for delivery.
And isn't the front door to the building right there?
No, the front door of the building is at the Chamford corner next to the service drive.
I see. So the plan shows 3 sashes there. I mean, that's for the building, bringing vehicles in then?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So then I come around and park to the right of the service area and then I have to cross the service aisle to get into the building. Is that correct?
Unless you would park along Bayshore, the tandem parking spaces that are there, the outside, the row closest to the building or closest to the drive aisle would be where I think a majority of customers would park.
Thank you. Okay, great. Could you explain how vehicles are delivered to the facility?
So most vehicles do come on 9-car haulers. That is very typical. When a vehicle comes, it's in protective wrap, and it has to go through a detail, basically.
So where does the 9-car hauler go to get to before they take the cars off?
Well, it's going to go to an off-site storage lot. Much like making an appointment for getting your own car serviced, when those 9 cars come, they have to be scheduled to be prepped for sale and delivery.
So are the 9-car vehicle delivery machines coming to this site?
No.
Or they're never coming here. So how do the cars get here?
Porters. So, I mean, that's the big difference, I think, between an automotive dealer and almost any other business is every one of our locations typically has, any car dealer typically has at least 5 individuals whose job it is to move cars. Their job is to retrieve a customer's car, move a car that's just been detailed, pick it up from a storage lot. So 2 porters would go to a storage lot, pick up the car when it's scheduled for a detail.
I'm just thinking new cars. I mean, you've got to sell dozens of cars a week. How do they physically get to this site so a customer can pick them up? Saying one at a time, each one is individually driven from a storage site offsite.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Okay, so you don't need any offloading big vehicles. Is that what you're really saying?
100%. A 9-vehicle hauler does not fit on a 2-acre site.
That's the point of my questions. It doesn't fit. And,
right, 100%. I mean, the loading spaces on site are for UPS and FedEx.
So, and you operate other dealerships around the Bay Area, right?
That is correct.
Do other dealerships also have this facility where they just don't accept large car deliveries?
In the Bay Area, most of our sites are actually larger. We have Fremont and Marin that have very large facilities. In Seattle, other locations across the country, we have very small facilities that have offsite storage.
Are there any other facilities you operate that function this way where you don't accept any multi-car deliveries?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we don't have room. Volvo Seattle absolutely does not have room to deliver cars on site. It's a half the size of this project.
Okay, thanks for answering that question. Those are my questions, Osma. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I have a few more questions for you. Where is this offsite? How far is it? And
Oh, we do not have it yet. I mean, being that we're a ways away from opening, they're leased sites that change from time to time. If we had a site today, chances are we wouldn't have that exact same site in 10 or 15 years. The offsite storage facilities are constantly evolving and constantly changing, depending on inventory needs. But we can't survive without them.
okay, I only ask because I wonder which, if they'd be coming from East Bay Shore, if they'd be coming from Embarcadero.
It's hard to say. And sometimes we have multiple offsite storage lots. We currently next door, Audi Palo Alto is our store as well. And we currently have one offsite storage facility specifically for inventory.
Okay. Okay. Has staff had a chance to find the old bicycle path solution?
Yes, let me, I think, am I on Zoom already?
Okay, I do have one more question for the applicant.
I might have
Before
to get
we
off.
pull that up.
How do I get
So
oh, here,
I think I've read that the glazing is a bird safe glazing. Is that
Yes.
right? What kind of bird safe glazing are you planning to use?
That I cannot tell you. The question came up from staff and I reached out to my architect and specifically asked, can we specify a bird safe glazing? And his answer was yes, that is an option. That is a box to check.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Wait, well, I'm not done yet. I had a question. So this is the solution from our previous approval?
This is the previous approval, yes. The file's a little bit large, so it's hard to maneuver, but what you're seeing is basically a larger sidewalk that both pedestrians and bicycles could use. And we had on Embarcadero, we also had in the center here, we had sort of was a stopping station for bicycles or something to that degree.
Does this retain the streets along Bayshore? The solution?
I believe that we might have been going a few feet into the streets, but I mean, it was all passed through transportation. So we had the right measurements to do all of this.
Sorry, I was asking if the trees are retained.
No, in our previous approval, the existing trees on Bayshore did need to be removed, and we were planting new smaller trees that were also, native to the area.
Thank you for the clarification. There's more questions from Vice Chair Hirsch.
Yeah, I had two, but I'm trying to remember what the second one was. Of the access way, the repair area. And I'm noticing actually it is not in the section that's on drawing number 09. There's an indication of an upper wall which appears to be a solid wall, and it's not glazed all the way up from ground to roof. So it's conceivable that there might be wood on that side as well. And I'm wondering what's correct there? Is there an elevation? Do you have an elevation of that wall as a glazed wall? It seems to have an upper story within the showroom section there, but it's just blocked out as a solid area. This section. So I just didn't find that the answer to the question was really adequate from the applicant. I'm not asking you, Sheldon. I'm asking the applicant about that.
So I think, would it be to, I think maybe answer the previous question, would it be possible to continue the reclaimed wood on both sides of the service drive?
Correct.
I think that would be possible. the intent is to have that glazing on the showroom go up as high as possible. To go, quote, all the way up to the ceiling or roof. It may have to switch from storefront glass to curtain wall glass. Again, we can be flexible on that.
Okay, I'm just expressing Commissioner Chen's thought at that point, The other question I have, Sheldon, this could be for you. The backside of the building at this point, that's the side to the east, shows an area of light green adjacent to the building itself. Is there any requirement for that, or could the building actually shift closer to the east side of the whole site, taking away that, whatever it is, the light green area? I'm looking at 01 for that, and which of course could be a significant amount of space, although it's small. If you shifted that to the absolutely other side of the building, for whatever purpose we decide is more important here. But at this point, my guess is has something to do with the bicycle trail. Could the building be shifted that dimension, do you think?
I mean, well, maybe it's another combination of question of myself and Mr. Iverson, but if in doing so, then we would eliminate that green area, some of those trees that are providing the shading, and you're providing some benefit on the other side where maybe you could put some shading there potentially, maybe it offsets.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be, I guess, from staff's position is that it may be a neutral move.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You know what? Can I ask you to speak to that?
The question of can we shift the building towards Audi?
Correct.
I believe that would be possible. We do have stormwater facilities over on that side of the building. That would be really our limiting factor.
Do you have some sense of what the dimension of that to somebody? Do you have somebody can answer how big that area actually is?
The stormwater treatment?
No.
Oh, sorry.
The extra space that's green at the back of the building.
It's probably like 6 or 7 feet. You're talking about just the area that's the building, and then you have the planter. It's probably about 6 or 7 feet.
6 or 7 feet. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's significant, I think.
Sorry, apologies. Is that 6 or 7 feet? I just want to make sure I'm following the same thing. So from the gray shaded easternmost parking spaces to the edge of the property line, is that the green strip that we're looking at? Next to the building?
Yeah, let me.
Got it. So wrapping around that backside of the building. So not the parking edge to the property line, but actually at the building itself. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, we need to maintain that space. I think you were just right that there's a 5-foot space that we need there.
Okay, any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you. All right, let's come back to the board. Who would like to go first? Don't all jump at once.
If there's
Would you like to take
a
the
second
thunder?
round, that we could all have, it might be important here.
Sure, yeah, everyone will have one round and then we'll have a
Let's
chance
see
to
how we
respond.
do on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind starting off on this one.
okay.
Well, I want to sort of say that, we've been through this a couple of times now. And I think we're getting closer, albeit there's some significant problems. And I think the biggest obvious significant problem is that the bicycle path that I can see. The DEE, as we've discussed it, I think there can be some resolution on on that. The drive-through situation, I think, is still a significant issue for me because it does affect the bicycle path as well. The issue that was raised about the pedestrians getting to the entry to the display, I think that can sort of be answered because there really isn't much of a choice in the matter. But there is some amount of sort of sidewalk space from the cars that are part of the going to be coming to go to the showroom because they're parked adjacent to the building. They can certainly walk across the area, but they will have to cross over the service access at that point. And I suppose there's some way of paving that and making sure that the cars don't impede the pedestrian traffic for the clients who are coming to see the cars in the showroom. My biggest concern here is, of course, is the bicycle path, but it also is the fact that almost what you see right now is here you're coming along Bayshore and you have 2 lanes of car parking inside of the site. So what we looked at in this infeasible or initial scheme of multiple elevator parking within the building is now kind of on the perimeter of the site. You know, those particular cars are all moved to the perimeter. So you have 2 lanes of cars, and then you have a bicycle path. And this is a issue that just hasn't been solved. I mean, it hasn't been solved to my satisfaction that it is impossible to create a bicycle path that goes on East Bay Shore from the direction at which it's coming to Embarcadero, makes the turn in some way, conflict with the trees, yes, overwhelming kind of sense of cars on your right as you're going in that direction. I don't accept, by the way, the idea that, oh, this isn't possible and maybe it should be in the street and somebody should design that. This is not an intersection where you can do that. And anybody who rides a bicycle knows that that's way too dangerous to have any bicycles in the street on Bayshore. And in fact, on Embarcadero as well. But certainly Bayshore is impossible that way. And it is absolutely essential that the bicycle path be considered for this intersection. And without it, I could never accept this project. Now, what to do and how to do it, you know, that's a bit of a study that I think is going to require you to come back to us again. But the trees are certainly an issue. And I mentioned just now that if the building could be shifted and that green space at the back of the building could be put on the opposite side, you have an opportunity to expand the potential bicycle path so that it makes that corner. Medina, maybe you could put up the photos, yeah. I mean, I'm perfectly aware that this was getting to be a problem, you know, this would be the hold right there, would be a problem, you know. This is only 1 lane of cars parked on the site side and the trees that are there. Okay, you know, they're all quite mature trees, but maybe maybe one answer is we have to start all over again with the trees and rethink about where they are. But definitely there needs to be more space for a bicycle path on Bayshore. In my mind, that's the first requirement here. And it's a problem because it's not an easy matter. Go ahead and what's the next one here? So next photo. Well, that's at the corner. And you can just see that there's regrading required here to meet the sidewalk level. There's about a 3-foot raise at that corner of the landscape. And then there's this strange bush, which is going to be definitely in the way. Next one. Medina, next. Yeah, next. Well, this one is turning back the other way, looking at Embarcadero. So, you know, there are objects here that are to be considered, but you can see there's a crosswalk that happens at this location. So following the path, this is not a crossover, of course, to Gang Road, which is further up. And that has to be explored. And we have to look at the bike path and how do you get across Embarcadero. But clearly, this is one possibility that might be able to work to a path on the other side. But there are objects to be considered at this point. So Moon, that's towards Audi. And when you get to Audi, of course, then there are some other issues. But I think there's only one entry into the Audi facility at this point. And so that's the only one you'd have to consider versus the present site plan here, in which there'll be two. One of them will be on Bayshore, and one of them will be on Embarcadero. Okay. The next one doesn't really count because I'll just discuss it because the trees that are separating us at this point from the neighboring property, the commercial property next to us, their trees are very tall along the border. So lower trees have to be considered. Some of these trees are not in great shape. And I think we have to talk about that. But I mean, in particular, I'm kind of concerned about the lower closure. The next one, Medina. Well, see, there is blank spaces in the middle here that aren't complete. So we need to really know what trees are going to be retained on. They're tall, and that's good. We don't have to have so many tall trees at this point because the building is so much lower. So looking at the landscape at that point, I think that's the end of my slides, Medina. Yeah, okay. So getting back to the building itself. I had the thought that somehow or other it would be, there are a couple of issues. One of them is the whatever it's called, the heat problem. What do you call the heat island? Is it called
the
heat island effect?
The urban heat island.
You know, that there are different ways to potentially solve some of that. One of them might be that you would have some car canopies. Maybe those car canopies would have solar collectors on top of them. There are ways in which you could design the perimeter of this site. I think our code doesn't mention them exactly. What is it allowed to have some canopies over car parking as a way of dealing with some of the heat island?
Yeah, and unfortunately, no, the way the code is written, it talks about parking surface areas and shading that with trees.
Shading with trees only.
Yeah, with trees only. So, I mean, that's something that we're willing to look into. You know, does that need a code change? Is very possible.
We had that discussion, and yes, I think that seems to be a way in which you might deal with the heat island. So I would like to say that from my standpoint, I don't see why you wouldn't do something like that, that you wouldn't consider designing some way of creating shade. It doesn't necessarily have to be trees in all cases. It could be shading device lower. So the other aspect of this that bothers me is that this double layer of cars on the Bayshore side of the site in particular. You know, what you're really going to see from a car point of view is cars. You're going to be sitting there at the height in the car coming up Bayshore, and you're going to look at a face of cars. You're not going to hardly see the building. So if that is in fact the case, maybe there's some way of dealing with the perimeter with the shading devices that also interrupt some of that up to a certain level. I don't want to design it, but I just think that trees and or some form of perimeter enclosure, not higher than, say, fencing or some kind of detailed fencing might be, beautiful fencing, that is, might be appropriate at this point. So you're not just looking at cars on the way in, on the way up Bay Shore. I mean, I understand you have to sell Mercedes, so there are different ways you might consider how you might do that. Not if you're going to have double layers of cars, that's an item to be considered, you know. But heat island is got to be solved. I think it's kind of the issue number two, and you really need to deal with it. We have these environmental things, you know, if you're a bicyclist, you don't want to be riding against in that area if it's too hot. So tree shading and other means of creating less of a heat island on the fact that you're using so much paving all around this building. Compare that with the fact that you're also trying to sell cars. Frankly, it would be much preferable in my mind if you didn't have to have your display of cars, of new cars, on that side of the building, you know, and you let your showroom do the selling. You know, you certainly have a big enough showroom probably for most of your vehicles, I would think. And you have your display at the corner of the featured car. You know, do you really need to have a double layer of storage on that side? Because if you didn't, that makes all the difference in the world. You then have the possibility of a bike path, a real bike path. You then have the possibility of a double layer of trees. Suppose you didn't have all of that, you know, that you spread it out and you had it, or you had it organized differently and you didn't have every single car option and color option, et cetera, on that perimeter. I think it's worth really thinking about that, because there's no doubt in my mind that the bike path is going to happen somehow. We're going to make it happen. I hope the city will make it happen. I recognize the fact that what you're saying about the interruption in that bike path from the neighboring properties, but that's a problem that maybe will change someday, you know, or maybe we could ask the neighboring property to sign it in some way that, or be more, you know, there's other ways of dealing with this. Asking them to, it appears that there, you know, is a viable use there. It's not going to change probably the commercial, you know, offices that are next door. My accountant happens to be in there. So it'll probably continue, and safety issues are an issue there. And maybe the owner of that property might recognize the fact that when this bike lane gets to be official, you know, they have to respond in some way. I don't know if there's particular outreach, but I think that could be a possibility. There has to be a connection when this is put to its use of a bike lane, that's going to continue to go down to the path that goes into the Baylands, et cetera, to the bridge across 101. That is my major concern to that aspect of the building. As to the relocation of the car wash, I think that's an excellent change from where it was before. We had so many issues with it where it was before. to talk a bit about the outside of the building. I guess we can live with the fact that Mercedes has given up on its own old image, which we liked so much, the detail. But this seems to be pretty nice and slick and complete. I have a problem with the limitation of the green wall. I kind of like it now. At one point I was concerned about the wood, but I think the wood being brought on the inside is really going to be quite an exciting thing. I think it would be good if it were, as Commissioner Chen said, if it were on both sides of the wall there somehow. I think it's fine to look into the showroom at the lower level, but up above, if the wood was carried to the opposite side, I think that would be great. And then as to the green wall, you know, I disagree with your characterization of the back of the building there, because you're actually going to see that building from Bayshore as you're coming up. And you turn the corner, but I don't know why you don't go around the whole volume that is right there at the south side of the building, southwest side of the building. And go all the way through and into the base of the building as well. I think it would make an incredible volume. And if I understand it correctly, the metal detail that is above it continues around that side as well. So if it went all the way around and turned into the building, frankly, I was hoping that maybe even the car wash got it as well, but maybe it could stop at that point because I think there's a change in material. If I have it true, yeah, there's a change in material at that point. And from that point, it could kind of relate better to the back, the other wall, the other service wall, which indeed is just out of sight kind of at the back wall, and it's kind of really hidden by Audi on the other side as well. And so it isn't so important, but you know, the back is the back, and then this carries the front all the way around. And frankly, it's on the side that's facing somewhat towards the Baylands. And, you know, from earlier schemes, we were pushing it to extend even further onto that side, that back wall, that side wall of the building. So I would push very strongly for continuing the green wall all around the corner there. Let me see if I have some other service area. You know, the service area issue as to its whether it works or it doesn't. I mean, I think that it seems logical that you define the parking, if you're going to keep it opposite there where it could be useful. Define the hours that it's going to be fixed and not movable in that area, that you have people park there when they're going to be there all day and they aren't going to leave. And I imagine you could determine somehow your timing of the service when they come to the building and work that one out so it's satisfactory to the city. And then you could have both of those satisfy the need for deliveries back there. You mentioned it's going to be perhaps not just parts and materials. It could be paperwork or whatever. Where is that drop off going to occur? It could, I suppose it could occur in the area that Commissioner Balte was talking about at the front of the building where there's that recess and you're going to take the cars in. You could keep a car there or a small truck for other kinds of delivery. And you could designate it that way as well. And it would satisfy UPS or whatever, you know, and see if that could work. And solve that problem. It doesn't seem to be insoluble. There's no way to reduce the peak hour issue. And that's one hell of an intersection there. You know, every one of us, I'm sure, have been stuck there at some point trying to get across. So drive aisle, I'm concerned about it, but if you say you can schedule it so that your service vehicles don't end up projecting out of the building and causing a problem. I have a Mini Cooper and I noticed that, when I go for repairs there, it extends out quite a distance into the area where you would like to get out of the car and go to the office portion. And it would be a shame. I think the idea of the entry immediately adjacent to it is a good one. You get out of your car and you're going to go there and then you cross that line. But it is critical that you can schedule it so that there won't be any conflict between people coming to the showroom versus people driving their car into this area and being outside the building.
David,
Okay.
is it okay if we're sort of running low on time.
Are we?
I think we were kind of, I want to make sure all the other board members get a chance to speak. So
Well,
are there any last comments?
okay. Just to repeat, it's the bike issue, the possibility of moving the building to increase that area, the possibility of reducing the display cars at that edge of the site in order to make the bike lane work. The idea of the heat island that you need to solve. Those are the major issue. I'll come back if I have anything at the end.
Thanks. Board Member Chen?
Okay, you can move it on.
Okay, I think that's still the building. I think it's generally, I'm in favor of the design. I like the clean and simple design of it's a mass building, and I think the massing and the scale, the materials, it looks great on the buildings. And I appreciate you introduced two materials that is not common for dealerships. One is the reclaimed wood and the other is the green wall. And appreciate you wrap around the corner to let the green wall continue to the side elevations. But actually I'm okay as far as where the green wall needs to stop on the side elevation. I'm okay with where it is proposed now, because it is a side elevation, and also after all, it's a dealership. So I think it is reasonable to continue to have larger surface of the metal panel on that side too. So I'm okay with the amount of green wall on the side elevation. And as far as the site plan, I do encourage the applicant to consider native trees. And I understand the bike issues, the bike lane, bicycle lane. It has been a long time issue there for a while, so I'm not sure if I have any good solution right here. Maybe the PTC should be involved more and to provide guidance and solve the problem here. And I think what Vice Chair Hirsch suggested, maybe it might work if we could shift the building towards the Audi direction, and then which means we will have some extra space on this side to create wider lanes for the bicycle. I think that works. And let's see. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Rosenberg?
Thank you. Again, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the time. When considering a project like this, there's really the two sort of components are the site and the building itself. Now, I'm going to start with the building because that is sort of our main focus to some extent. I think the low mass, the low FAR the low heights, the minimal volume are really very desirable. I think you've done a very good job with that, and that is to be commended. I think the materials are high quality. I think the design is attractive. Very minor comments would be on that back facade. Yeah, not every side can be pretty. I get it. But that back side, which would be the east facing facade, something as simply as indenting that service area just a little bit could create a little bit more breakup of that very long, very straight facade on that side. So again, one very minor comment, maybe possibly indenting that service drive facade portion by just a couple feet. It would be enough to sort of give a little bit more interest. Maybe a design material change, something to, again, try and minimal intrusion on the design of the building to get this to be a little bit more attractive on that east facing side. Slightly problematic for me is, again, the customer parking and be able to get from customer parking, having to cross that driveway to get to the entrance doors. I don't really see a huge, there's definitely some pathway paving that you could do there, something to make that a little bit more user friendly, but just food for thought, reconsider that and how to get from customer parking to that main entry with a little bit more ease. So overall, the building really, it's attractive, it's high quality. I'm a fan. Now we come to part 2, which is the site. And I think this is really where most of the problems with this project stem from, is the siting, the location, and how this is sort of oriented on the lot. I would echo Board Member Hirsch's comments that this front row on Bay Shore, these 19 parking spaces, if those are eliminated, you've solved a lot of problems here. Bike pathways versus trees, right? We've got 2 issues that we're considering here. They're a little bit at odds with each other in that zone, because if we cut down the existing trees, we can't really replant because of PG&E's easement. Putting a bike path in there, yes, would hinder these extra 19 spaces, but a grand total of spaces in this property, from what I'm able to count, is 139. So taking out 19 spaces leaves you with 120 spaces. That's still quite a significant number. Understandable, it is a car dealership, you want as many as possible, but that is still a notable number. So I'm having a very hard time accepting the fact that a property that was rezoned contingent on having a bike path is trying to get out of having a bike path because there's not the space for it. I'm having a hard time accepting that as a valid argument, especially considering that there are 19 spaces right here on that pathway in an easement already along the road we're looking at. And that's much wider than 10 feet, right? So I would urge a reconsideration of that facade and a reconsideration of getting this bike path in there. Again, a small comment is there's these 2 small parking spaces right near that entrance from Bay Shore. I think those 2 little parking spaces might be problematic. Just trying to get in and out while there's traffic coming in and out. Lastly, I'm also just looking at the site plan. I'm able to see 5 spaces pretty close to the building that could potentially more trees. So getting 5 more trees in there is something, it's a step in the right direction. Just on some of these little green landing spots, it's possible to get them in. While the canopy coverage and shading is contingent on trees, I do like the concept that there would be some solar offset and some shading gain. I think that by the applicant making those steps in the right direction, would be more inclined to potentially be considering a variance of some variety or another, that maybe trees aren't the only solution here. Additionally, I would like to put out there the concept of a green roof or a living roof, simply because the fact that you're already utilizing similar technology for the green wall. Maybe that is something that we could factor into a decision at some point, that it's trying to get some of this offset. And as Board Member Hirsch had stated, that it would be reducing the heat island effect on this property. So any sort of steps in that direction, I would encourage. That's pretty much it for me for today. I do have to say, just as a sort of side comment, I think that your renderings, the landscape choices on the renderings are not doing you any favors. It looks like a bunch of tumbleweeds and dead grass, and I would encourage a revision of maybe some of that landscaping in the renderings, just as a personal note. So thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Board Member Bolte.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues pretty consistently. I'd like to focus my comments on what I think are the really critical issues, which is the bicycle path and the parking lot shading and configuration. I have other ideas about the rest of this, but those are critical. I think it's incorrect to state that AASHTO standards are what would govern us from not having an on-site parking lot. As you go up and down the Bay Trail on the peninsula, other institutions and developments have managed to find ways to create bicycle paths on their property, on the edge of their property, that are successful. The Bay Trail is a hybrid of many kinds of bicycle paths, of people, of companies, of buildings, developments, trying to make it more successful. And I think this is just one more piece of that path, and it's incumbent upon you to do your part to make it continuous. In particular, I'm looking at the Facebook development when they took over the Sun campus, and a larger development perhaps, but they've gone through tremendous efforts to do their part in creating the Bayland, the Bay Trail. And I think you just have to do your part. It's going to have to happen no matter what. So the question really comes down to, in my mind, whether you keep those trees under the power line easement and put the bike path right on the edge of the road, or if you put it inboard of those trees. And that's exactly the issue we struggled with over and over again on the previous 15 hearings about this project. So Mr. Iverson, I think the sooner you just grip that fact, you've got to do something. It's not going to go away. And it's not just the ARB, but it's the whole community will insist that you provide some sort of path there. So I'd like to say that the ARB in the past and the city council supported the idea of replacing the trees with a bike path. We had to make a value judgment. Which do we want more? The bike path is what we want. So I think that would be a compromise that the community will accept, and it would make it possible then not to have the path impinge too much on your property, at most a few feet. And that's a fair compromise. The city is going to have to give you a design enhancement exception, and we need to do a transportation demand management plan, both of which are things that I could see requiring a bike path to become feasible. You want a design enhancement exception so you don't build to the property line. Well, having a bike path there makes that finding easier to make. It's a real help for the design attractiveness of the building, having the bike path there and having the new landscaping. So I'm quite comfortable saying that one is contingent upon the other. So you're going to find that coming from the ARB. You've heard it from the board members here, and you're going to hear it consistently from the city council, from the planning commission. Let's not do another 16 hearings, but come to some closure on that path. The parking lot shading is another issue. I just don't see how you can't design this project so you get more landscaping within that parking lot. You could do trees and just eliminate the parking. You could do some sort of structure with greenery growing on the structure. That's something the city has accepted on other projects in the past. There's a clear path forward on that. It just seems to me improper not to meet that shading requirement. There's serious environmental issues with having that much asphalt, and shading with landscaping is one reasonable thing. As I look at your site plan, it seems to me a huge number of those parking spaces are just to do with inventory storage. If you're bringing vehicles on as needed anyway, maybe that inventory storage is not all needed. Maybe there's other ways to think about it. But I can easily see ways you could shift the building, reconfigure the parking, put more landscaping in there, many ways to make that work. So again, I think what staff was asking us to do, and what I hope you're hearing from us, is to give you a clear supporting backup that the parking shading is important and has to be met somehow. So those are the two really critical issues, and I think the board should just make a clear, definitive statement about where we stand on those two things. And I support just saying the bike path is required and the parking shading must be met. With those things out there, then the question of the building complying with the Bayland design guideline, the colors, that's where the green wall came from originally, was on the back of the building, just because you could see that from the Bayland Trail out behind this building. You could see the building, so the applicant originally proposed putting a green wall on that side of the building. It's now morphed around to Bayshore, and it's being taken off the back of the building. And I think that the decision we made at the time in the past was that the parts of the building that face the Baylands are where we want to hold the Baylands design standards most tightly. That's where the green wall made sense. We asked for muted colors on the plaster and the finishes facing that direction. That seems to be lost in this package here, certainly what we're seeing today. the green walls facing Bayshore Boulevard, which doesn't make any sense to me. And you have a fairly cold gray plaster wall at the back where you could be seen from the Bayland side of things. Those are simple design changes to work on, and I don't think that affects my take on the overall project, but it's something that would need to be looked at. I think you do need to meet the Bayland's design standards, and our interpretation in the past has been that that's most important on the sides of the building that face the Baylands. So we want to see you push that way. I take issue with the landscaping the way you have it designed and presented right now, as Board Member Rosenberg said. But even the way you have it designed with a series of California buckeye trees along Bayshore just doesn't make sense. Those are unsightly, messy trees that the farthest thing I could think of from a Mercedes dealership. I'm left thinking you just haven't really put it together yet. And I can get that. You're looking at much bigger issues, but ultimately I think the landscaping plan needs to be more carefully put together. So I don't want to jump into that any more than that. But again, I'll leave it that critical issue is the bike path and the parking lot shading and configuration. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you to the applicant. Thank you to the members of the public that came to speak. And thank you to my fellow board members for very insightful comments. So I will kind of try to start where everyone else has started, which is the bike path. I really like the idea of getting rid of that row of parking and keeping the trees as is, because I think even last time, and that's why I kind of was asking staff to remind me what we had approved last time, I was very much against removing those trees to begin with. They look great, they're in good condition, and I appreciate the applicant for expressing interest in retaining them. I think a bike path, so, there's 19 spots, as Board Member Rosenberg mentioned. I think a bike path that could weave around parked cars might be kind of interesting. There could be a way of getting some of the showing parking there, and also kind of, there's 20 feet of space, right, in one parking spot there. Having something that in those car auto dealership museums or something, there's these meandering paths around cars. I don't know if that would be desirable from a perspective, but I think there might be a nice way to maybe include some parking in there, and maybe it's parallel. Maybe that's not feasible. I don't know. Had an idea of incorporating both, having you to be able to get both, but I would support a solution that retains the trees on site and also includes a bike path. And it seems like maybe cutting into those parking spaces is the way to do that. I am okay with the exception on the loading, given the discussion about delivery. I agree with my fellow board members about the shading. It would be good to make those met. I'll transition to bird safety in architecture. So I've looked into this a little bit more. So bird safe glazing has some interesting components. There are different ways of bird safing glass. Some of them are visible to the human eye. Which are kind of these dot matrices, or they are patterns on the glass that are visible to the eye. There are other ways of having bird safe glazing using UV treatments, which are invisible to the human eye. A lot of people like those, but I was doing some research recently that there is some question about how effective those are. So birds can see that UV treatment, but I think there was something about having a certain level of density of that UV treatment to make sure that it is successful. But definitely something that is visible, like a dot matrix, which actually looks kind of nice, would be something I recommend. Another item is that reflective glazing is dangerous because birds feel, that they can see trees and stuff through there. So it's kind of a funny thing because transparent glazing is also an issue as well. So really something to consider, and I would be looking very closely when you guys come back to the product that you guys end up picking for your bird safe glass. Another interesting thing about bird safety and architecture is that actually building siting and orientation and amount of greenery is a huge part. So, and low-rise buildings especially have the highest amount of collisions. And this is a low-rise building, which I'll agree with my fellow board members is very appropriate for this site. So some mitigation measures for low-rise buildings are to have green walls and to have berms and landscape right up against the building to sort of have a path that guides the birds to the right place. I would agree with Board Member Rosenberg about a green roof. That's also something that is recommended. And you have a big extensive roof here, but I think, you know, having something along the edges of the roof are probably most important if you would consider that. That kind of leads me to the concept about colors. So it's true. I mean, Board Member Balti is right. These colors are not very muted. They're very stark in terms of their darkness, which I know is what Mercedes probably wants in their branding. I think I could be more okay to accept these colors if there was a green roof or if there was more interleaving of the green wall. I like where it is, actually. I like that it is facing Bayshore. It's an expensive thing and you want most people to see that. But I agree with Board Member Balte that something needs to be done on the side that is visible from the Bay Trail. So in the past, the applicant had green screens or maybe adding more reclaimed wood or adding more muted colors. The Sandy Hook gray is actually really rough. I'm not sure I really like that color. And I know it's a muted beige tan. There's other ways to get there without that color. So I would recommend asking your architect to reconsider the side that faces the Baylands to include more green screens, which are less expensive, but also do the job. And also, like I said, you know, the parapets that show the ribbed, the dark charcoal ribs, you know, those are the ones that I'm pretty concerned about. I would ask, you know, the reclaimed wood is a really great choice. Bring those in. Maybe those are your parapet screens. Bring those in other places. Even the southeast elevation of that huge, extensive, dark ribbed metal panel could be broken up better with some warm things like wood. Let's see, I do have some more comments. I'll agree with the comment about modulating the massing and having a little bit more variation in the back and the sides that are visible. The thing you have is a building in the round. So there actually is no real back of the building. It is going to be visible from a lot of places. So we can't forget that. Also, this is nitpicky, but the choice of bike rack that's in the packet is a very inferior choice. Whoever designed that clearly has never had their bike stolen. So I would recommend changing that choice of the bike rack to something that's like a half circle or U-shape. The one that's in there right now with the pole won't protect the front wheel and the frame, which is what's important. Okay. I think we've hit almost everything. There any more comments that fellow board members would like to make after hearing everybody's thoughts? Any questions from staff of our board? Have we been pretty clear?
One more comment on the green wall. So I understand your point to bring the green wall back to the backside of the house so that the Bay Trail people can see from there. But in reality, I'm not sure how much green wall actually the people can see from there because of the neighbors, the buildings there and the trees all the way around the property line, right? It's not all the trees planted not only happen to this property, but also the opposite side. It's all, there are trees around the property. So the green wall probably is only 20 feet tall, something like that. So I just doubted like if it's visible from the Bay Trail. So to me, it's more like the green wall facing the East Bay Shore, maybe it makes more sense so that it's really the people passing the Bay Shore can really see it closely and understand now it's a green wall there.
Yeah, and there's in the previous application, I think I remember there being a rendering from the Bay Trail, and that the facade is visible from there.
Okay.
And I do think maybe it was Peter went out there and took a picture.
I've been out there several times and looked at it, and you're both correct. The previous application's facade was quite visible. That was closer to the Bay Trail. They really went back on the Audi lot, and it was taller. This application is different. I think it's on the applicant to convince us of that. I think it's fair to say for all of us, if this building is visible from the Bay Trail, then you really have to think hard what it looks like, and these colors aren't adequate. If it's not visible, then we're going to give you more latitude. So prove it to us. You can go over there with the camera and take a picture. You can see it very easily.
I think a rendering from that angle would be very helpful.
That's a good point. I forgot that previous application was really a lot taller. Yeah. So maybe you're right. Maybe, I guess we'll have to see when that rendering comes up. Okay. Any more comments, staff?
We didn't have Ying-Chi chime in on the bike trail distinctly. I think it's really important for all five of us, if we think the bike trail is important, to clearly say it and to clearly say that we think so for architectural design reasons. You can't approve a design enhancement exception without a bike trail. The council, the planning commission, they need to hear strong statements from us.
I agree 100% that the bicycle lane should be provided there. But I think PTC need to be involved more in this issue because it will not be an issue to this specific lot only. We need to see more about a larger view of this intersection, like how the bike lane nearby, how to connect this with each other so that it will work, it will functionally right in this property.
I see it as an aesthetic issue of the Bayfront design. When the building is that far from the street, you have to do something else to make up for the fact that our code would normally require the building to be out there. We do that because we want to get more vitality, more life, things going on the boulevard. If the building can't be there and we're willing to give it a design enhancement exception, we need something else to be there to make up for that, to substitute, to justify it. Well, a bike trail is a good solution for that. So I think if we can make that clear statement to staff, they can use that and go forward, but we have to agree on that.
I think, it sounds like we've all expressed support for the bike path in different ways and for maybe different reasons, and maybe that's okay. And so I think, whether it's to make the finding to do the DEE or if it's to make different findings needing more study, I agree, Ying-Chi, that even I was thinking like, what if, there's that left turn lane, could it be a left and a straight? And like, does that give you more space? And that really needs more study and a bigger, wider discussion. Okay. I was wanting to ask staff, have we been pretty clear or do you want us to summarize or do any straw polls?
That's what I was just going to go through. So I think we were hearing on the, let's see, on the northeast elevation, it's facing Audi, right? And so on there, we were thinking about, it shows some doors to the service area. We're probably going to remove those. And maybe that's sort of a long flat wall. We'll see about, doing some modulations there, some small moves that would help make that facade better. On the southeast elevation, which is likely more facing the Baylands, we'll make sure and get some renderings or to see how much of the building we can see. If it is visible, then we certainly need to make sure it conforms with the Bayland guidelines. That might mean, adding green wall material or something of the sort. As far as the loading spaces, it sounds like most are okay. The director can do the adjustment to remove one required loading space, which if it stays in the drive aisle, we would need to do that. But it sounds like most are okay with that, as long as we maybe have some conditions about, the larger 9-car deliveries are going off site and only the smaller deliveries are coming here. Parking lot shading, it sounds like most, I was getting a little bit, do we want to stay with the code that says landscaping, or do we want to look at some alternatives? So I could use some direction on that.
Do a straw poll on if we would be open to carports with solar shading or green roof. elements.
And could we, we'd have to explore too the code ramifications. Is that a variance? Is it a DEE? I'd have to look into that.
Didn't we approve the building on El Camino Joe Bellomo designed had some sort of metal screening with a planting that was considered to be a vegetated cover, which met the code. There was no variance, no question. It was just an interpretation of landscape covering.
Yeah, there was like a trellis with some vines, so it was kind of open. It wasn't a complete canopy.
But we determined that was
That's
used to
correct.
shade this.
Yeah.
So that's just a staff interpretation of the code.
So, and we also, on that one, we had street trees too. I mean, the street trees in that case happened to go over the parking lot. And so we were able to count some of those as well. So we can look into things like that. Is that the direction?
Doesn't sound like we need a straw poll. Seems like everybody's mostly in agreement.
Yeah, I think the shading should be vegetated.
Okay. And then,
Okay, so maybe we should do a straw poll then. Okay, let's do a straw poll about if we would be, so let's do one if we should keep it as vegetated, and one if we'd be open to a non-vegetated shading option. I guess vegetated one, we don't have to do the straw poll. We just assume that that's code and that's okay. So let's just do the straw poll for if we are open to a non-vegetated shading option for the parking area. Is that clear?
Just a little discussion about it. We're talking about all sides of the building here. Where it's up against Audi, we could do with mechanical shading rather than natural shading. It's possible for them to consider that. So I think we should keep it as an open possibility for it to be not only natural shading, not only vegetative shading, in other words. Could be canopy as well. My preference.
Would anybody else like to speak to?
I would agree that I think that having alternative solutions is something that I'd be personally willing to consider. I do appreciate Board Member Hirsch's comment on the placement of them, however, that we probably don't want the solar panels on the Bay Shore side. Now, in the same breath, I'm also going to say that's probably the best spot for them because of the PG&E tree problem. So I don't really have a good solution there, but I'd be open to alternative types of shading and considering the concept that PG&E doesn't want trees under that area. However, the aesthetics of that would be problematic for me as well. So trying to come up with something creative, I'd be willing to look at.
Yeah, I'm okay with the two options, but I'm not sure if we should also mention about like maximum non-vegetated roof area, because it could be possible issue for heat island effect again, right?
Just to Chair, sorry, just to be clear that we can't put any structures within that Bayshore area because of the easements. So vegetation is okay, like trees that are 50 feet, but you can't put a trellis or canopy.
We can't put even a carport. So that's just
No.
along the Bay Shore.
That's correct.
But on the,
Because I thought the Bayshore, the PG&E easement on Bayshore also had a problem with the trees. Did I misinterpret that?
Yeah,
that's
you
right.
can't have trees over height, I think it's 15 feet.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
okay, but the other two sides of the property that have parking could have something built there.
Yeah, the other sides are fine to have structures.
Okay, and then the only thing I'll add to this is that because of what I've been reading recently about bird safe design, because this is a very highly populated bird habitat, having vegetation will actually be much better for the environment. So
Yeah, I'd like to add that I think we're making a mistake by changing what's really written into the code. We're both taking upon ourselves to rewrite what's already in the code, which says trees. I think we're stretching it to let staff think of it as vegetation. To say we're okay with structures flies in the face of what's already been decided. More than that, it's not just providing the shade, but the landscaping, the greenery is really valuable for all kinds of heat island effect, for global warming effect, for land habitat for plants, birds and things. And I don't think it's that onerous in this case to request it to be landscaping. I think there's plenty of ways they could meet that, but I think we have to be very careful. If we start allowing it to be structures, then everybody who wants to do a surface parking lot in Palo Alto is going to start asking us the same thing. Really think hard about the Pandora's box we're opening by allowing it in this one situation, by playing, some sort of taking upon ourselves the power to rewrite the code this way. I'm very uncomfortable with that. I think that this case doesn't require it anyway, and just for us to do that, I think is a big deal.
when you say structures, do you mean like vegetated green roof structures as well?
Well, no, what I'm hearing Board Member Hirsch suggest is some sort of a carport, some sort of a mechanical covering. And in this case, I think they could easily find a different way to figure their storage, which is not parking by the definition of the code, and make that work. There's so many ways. This is a big enough site, but think hard that of all the other applications we see where they have a surface parking lot and we're asking them to meet 50%, and it's hard. And they would love to start meeting that with other built environments instead. And I don't think that's the intent of the code or good for us to allow.
In response to that, I thought you had mentioned that there was a project in which canopies were used over parking and they were successful.
Yes, that was Joe Bellomo had some sort of lightweight trellis. I think it was a wire mesh which supported vines, but it was the vines that give you the shading, not the structure. The structure is a landscaping device to support the plantings, and the plantings provided the shade. And at the time, we didn't even question it too much. It was really, they were using street trees to provide the coverage, which made sense, but it was questionable to staff. The applicant would have loved to have just had a solid roof over the car park instead of the landscaping. And we felt it was important to have the greenery, to have that softness, freshness that comes from the plants. And they were able to make it work. This is a building on El Camino, on South Palo Alto and El Camino.
Right. From what I remember, there was a roof over that, a metal roof of some sort over that project. I think, I don't, I think that the idea of a natural roof, something that could be, it's a nice idea, but that we should, you can design something like that. It could be designed well. I think he did design it quite well. The detail of it was quite beautiful. It could also be more woodsy elements. It doesn't have to be a harsh element. And since there's already wood on this project, you could well imagine that something could be done in wood. And it could be with vines on it as well. There's possibilities. So I just think it's too limiting to say it must be trees.
Yeah, I was using the word vegetated.
Okay.
I think that's a fair compromise, but I'm just one person here.
Okay.
Sounds like we do need to do both straw polls. So let's do first straw poll of being open to a vegetated non-tree shading element to meet the shading requirement. Is that clear for the straw poll?
Clear.
Okay, so let's take a straw poll if you would be in support of a non-tree vegetated shading device. Board Member Chen?
Yes.
Sorry?
You want to just raise hands? Or?
Okay, we can do raise hands. Who'd be in support? Okay, great. All right, so all 5 members raised their hands. Okay, so the second question is if you would be in support of a non-vegetated shading element. And I can, to meet the shading requirement, like a solar panel carport or something that doesn't have any vegetation on it, but shades the asphalt. And I can also add in a limited area. Okay, so raise your hand if you'd be in support of that. Is it clear? Okay.
Oh, okay, okay. A non-vegetarian, okay.
Okay, so there's 4. Yeah.
Board Member Balte's points are absolutely valid, that we are setting a precedent by even considering this. Now, the one argument I will make as a statement is that this has a pretty unique easement. It's got a pretty unique zoning condition. It's a pretty unique site. So I would say that this is a very specific to this site and this project consideration. I would not make this statement. I would not be considering this if it was any other typical site. The only reason that I'm considering this is because of how unique and sort of some of these restrictions on the site, especially considering that large PG&E setback. So I just want to put that out there as well.
Any other comments? I'll also say that I also wouldn't normally support this. And I would also say that a vegetated shading element is by far the higher preference. So the emphasis on this, for me at least, is a limited area. Okay, what other things do we need?
So can I verify that we had 4 hands on that last one?
We
Is
had
that-
4 hands on
Okay.
that with 2 big caveats.
Okay, the other items were the build to setback, which I think we've had enough discussion about, and then the Baylands master plan. I think we'll just be careful about the colors as we always are. And I think if it's visible and we added green walls, that would be helpful as well. And the bike path, I think we've all been clear about. So I think those are staff's, I think we're good from there.
Okay.
One other comment. I mentioned the fact that the building could be moved back, possibly to make more room on Bay Shore. It seems to me that that's reasonable.
Should we take a straw poll for that?
Sure.
So what would be deleted if the building were to be moved, I guess, plan right? So would the landscape buffer along the edge of the building?
Shall we ask the applicant whether they would think about it?
Safety?
Yeah, if there is any other issue that might come if the building shifted the other way. If they want to.
We should make sure we're all on mic one at
Yeah,
a time.
sorry, we should all be on mic.
Apologies. Yeah.
I think, so I guess let Board Member Hirsch state the virtues of these, and then I'll let the other board members give some other thoughts. So can you please state the thinking behind shifting the building?
Shift the capability to shift the building back a certain dimension
When you say back, you mean towards the
towards the
Audi?
Audi.
Okay, and we would
in that
delete,
direction to allow for more landscape area
and
on the Bay Shore side.
sorry, what gets deleted? Just that strip of,
That little strip that's adjacent to the building, maybe not all of it, because some protections need to be provided for the passage of the vehicles in that area.
okay. All right, so everyone's clear. Okay, Yingxi, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to know whether we should check with the applicant, whether there will be any other potential issues coming if we shift the building the other way that they can see right now.
Okay.
Or if they want to try that way.
I will consider asking that later. Go ahead.
I would gently argue that I think that reducing that 6-foot path on that side of the building actually could be problematic, because then you have no pedestrian safety path along the edge of the building. And if there's going to be people walking back there to see the car inventory for any reason or another, I would rather have that safety precaution for the pedestrian pathway. And I don't think it's really going to, I don't think that 6-foot shift is really going to provide a huge benefit to the East Bay Shore side. So I'm not at all inclined to require that building be shifted in that regard for that reason. I think that it's actually better to have the pedestrians paving on that side of the building.
Any thoughts, Board Member Volte, on
Yeah,
this?
I do.
I guess I want to understand, are we saying that the building applicant shall move the building further back like this?
I think it shall consider.
Just consider, because I think we've said 100 things today that they should consider. And so this is just one of them. Why is this any different than all the other things we've said? It's important, obviously, and certainly it's something they should consider, but they should consider rejiggering their parking too. They should consider making space for a path in the front. So I don't understand why we would want to be specific about this. I'm very uncomfortable specifying exactly what to do with the building. That's the designer's responsibility.
Take a look at the drawing. It includes trees along that edge of the building. So there's a certain amount of tree area. It's not a walking path. You really can't walk on that at all. It's a service area.
David, absolutely. It's something I would want to do as a designer, but I don't want to design it from here. Let them figure out what they're going to do to meet our requirements.
The only other comment I'll make is, I guess maybe those trees are providing some of the shading. And the other part of the research I did on bird safety is having a continuous landscape around the building is most preferred for guiding birds away from windows.
There are very few windows on that side of the building at all.
Well, I can support making it a consider recommendation, but not a requirement.
I think we're just asking for straw polls and just, if others agree or not.
There's windows on that side. Am I looking at the wrong side? It's this one, right? There's all kinds of windows here. What are you talking about? We're supposed to fly into those. Yes, it's something else. Okay, so is the straw poll clear, I guess?
Why don't you restate it? It's not clear to me, please.
Just to have the applicant consider shifting the building towards the Audi.
Shall we add to solve the bicycle lane problem or?
Yeah, what'd you say?
I think understanding what the concern is and why this solution is needed, I think is a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, I would sort of jump in here and say that I think this ties into the bigger question of, is this building appropriately situated on the site? End of discussion, right? Whether or not it involves that 6-foot strip, whether or not it's the double decker, or sorry, the tandem parking in the back. I think that the bigger question is the building appropriately situated on the site?
Right, or can the building maybe even get skinnier? Is another question.
How about if we rephrase it, have the applicant consider relocating the building to meet bicycle lane requirements and shaded parking requirements?
Correct.
Relocate or resize?
Sure.
Okay, all right. Straw poll of hands, people that are in favor. Okay, all hands were raised. Anything else that needs straw polls? Anybody? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for a robust discussion. Thank you to the applicant for the project. I think we're all excited about it. That's why we talk about it so much. Okay, let's see. So let's keep going. We are at 12:09.
Do we need to make a motion to continue?
Oh, you're right. Sorry. Yes, absolutely. Can we get a motion?
I make a motion to continue to a date uncertain.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, beat. Okay, motion by Rosenberg, seconded by Hirsch.
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. Yes, we all forgot. Okay. Great. So we are at 12:10. There's hope. Yeah, let's try to do these last items quickly. Yeah, we've got things to do. Okay, so the next item is the election of the chair and vice chair. Let me get to that part in my staff report.
Yes, so as you will see in the staff report, very short, quick staff report, all of the terms have been moved to end March 31st, which now I can remember because that's my birthday. So, and so we only had 3 board members, earlier in the year, and so we did not change over the chairship. But we think that it would be a good idea to do that now. And so it would end up being a 10-month term is staff suggestion, unless the board has other ideas.
Wait, a 10-month term?
From now until March 31st.
The recommendation says December 15th, so we would change the recommendation to March 31st.
Well, you can see the hard time I've been having keeping track of when terms end.
I had the same question because I also circled 2022 and I was like, I thought that the retreat, we said it was an 18-month term. So would that be 2023?
Yeah, I think it's possible this packet came out before our retreat.
Right. So I'm not,
happened.
yeah.
This, I have read through, let me go to the code very quickly. I believe it is March 31st, but I'm going to triple check myself.
So July.
Because again, this has changed like 3 or 4 times.
I think at the
past
retreat,
many
we did
years.
discuss moving it to having June to June, having
Right,
a
June
full year.
election. But I guess the term
So
starts
this
July
is written in Title II. And as it's currently written, it does say that effective January 1st of 2022, so January of this year, terms of office due to expire on December 15th shall be extended to expire on March 31st. And therefore, terms of office shall commence on April 1st. So as of January, March 31st is now the end of terms.
So for clarification, what we'd be voting on today is who's going to serve from July 1st until March 31st.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other clarification questions on the term? Okay. I don't remember how we did this last time.
2 things. Couldn't we, Ozma, just let the new chair take over sooner so they have a slightly longer term? How do you feel about that?
What do you mean?
Well, we're
Isn't
talking July 1st, but I guess it's only a few weeks from now. But
That's literally the next meeting.
is that the next meeting?
Yeah.
There's no more meetings in June?
No, it's June
Okay, so it
16th.
doesn't matter then. So then traditionally, the outgoing chair makes a motion, and then the outgoing vice chair makes a motion. That's the way I've seen it happen for the past few years.
Yeah, I think people are usually just nominating.
People get
Anyone can
nominated
nominate.
by
Right.
board members.
I know I nominated you with great pleasure.
Back in the day, when we were so young and bright-eyed. So, yeah, I mean, we can do nominations.
And based on the terms, how long are you allowed to continue serving if you were to be renominated? Can you serve back to back?
I don't believe we have any limitations on how many chair terms you could serve.
Okay.
Okay.
Because it's down to the 3 of you, right? We need experience. So it's just the 3 of you.
Sorry?
We need someone experienced in the chair seat. And it's one of the 3 of you. So it's almost like you guys should just.
Right. And
Figure that
Peter's
out.
been chair before and I've been chair now. And so David would have the opportunity if he would like. You accept? Yeah, I want to know that. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'll move that our current vice chair Hirsch become the new chair of the ARB.
I will gladly second that motion.
Okay, would anybody like to speak to the motion? Good. Yes, let's vote. Sorry, we need to go. Yes.
Board Member Baltai,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Is it okay if I take this though? Can I have this? Okay, awesome. Okay, so now for vice chair.
Yes. Well,
Would you like to nominate some?
Okay, so I'll accept that.
You accept
David,
it?
is your mic on?
Oh, your mic's off.
so it doesn't get recorded?
It didn't get recorded. You have to do it
Okay.
again.
I make a motion that Mr. Bolte is selected as vice chair.
I'll accept that. I'll second that.
Anybody would like to speak? Nope. Yes. Okay. All right, go for it.
Board Member Baltai,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Vice Chair Baltai.
So I'd like to make a public statement of appreciation for Ozma Thompson. She's been a wonderful chair for our group. She's brought us through some tough times with COVID. And it's been with tremendous pleasure as I've watched her mature into one of the best chairs of a board and commission I've seen in Palo Alto. Thank you, Ozma.
And one of the more fun singing ones.
I'd like to make a statement as well here because I hope that Ozma will continue to stay and observe some of my comments and tell me when I'm in error of pronouncements that I sometimes make here. So be active and don't shy away from that, okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the comments. And I'll also say, David, I'm excited to see you as a chair. And the only thing I'll probably push you on is time limits.
Timing.
Trying to get us out of here.
Brevity is a virtue.
Well, I think the good news is that the chair usually speaks last.
But I do really appreciate your input, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see where we go. Okay. All right. Let's do some minute approvals. Anybody want to move approving the minutes from April 21st?
I just want to give some clarification. This is now a verbatim minutes. Jody, is that right?
So we should have, you should have the full meeting in summary form. And then you should have, just for the Bay Shore project, you would have the verbatim minutes for the 21st.
Okay, so I'd like to point out to my colleagues that it does have a subtly different phrasing regarding the Bay Shore project, where the applicant actually did say, we'll take you to court. And so that's why we asked for this to be there. So I can recommend, I can move that we accept those minutes.
Do we have a second?
And just, sorry, before we have that, the clarification I'm looking for is, are these minutes, the verbatim minutes, going to be put in addition to the summary minutes, not replacing?
Yes, we will. I was assuming that we would put both on the website. I suppose we could take out the summary for Bay Shore if we
I
wanted
think
to.
you should keep both.
Okay, then, yeah, we can certainly do both.
Okay.
That's fine, yeah. Yeah, the motion is as you've presented them, Jody.
Is there a second?
Second.
I want to give board member Chen a chance.
Okay.
All right, motion by Volte, second by Chen. Let's do it.
Board
Yes.
Member Baltai,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
sorry, Chair Hirsch, Board Member Rosenberg.
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Board Member, right?
Not yet,
Not
next
yet, okay,
meeting.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0, sorry.
All right, thanks. Okay, and our last item is the drafts for May 5th. Draft meetings for May 5th. Meeting minutes, wow. Okay. Is there a motion?
Move to approve them.
Great.
A second.
Motion by Rosenberg, second by Volte. Let's do it.
Board Member Baltai,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Are there any board member questions, comments, or announcements?
It has been a joy having you as a chair, especially as the first term. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was great.
So I did have some announcements. I can be quick about it if we need to. I just wanted to, let's see. So we were going to talk more about council hearings and what was going on at those council hearings. So July 20th, there is going to be an item going to council to continue the temporary ban on the eligibility of commercial offices that are above the ground floor to participate in the Downtown in Lieu program. So that is proposed to continue, and that's the second reading. We also are going to, on June 20th, would have the second reading for objective standards. The big item there is that council wants to just use the objective standards for housing development projects. All other projects would continue to use our existing context-based design criteria and ARB findings, et cetera. The other item on the 20th is also the 2850 West Bayshore, the 48 townhomes that the ARB weighed in on. The director has floated that up to council to get direction from them on that specific project. On July 21st, June 21st, sorry. Yes, June 21st. Sorry if I'm saying July. All of this is happening in June next week. This is all happening next week. On the 21st is 1237 San Antonio Road, which is actually the Home Key Emergency Shelter Project. That will be going before council to ask them if they would like a 2-story or a 3-story project. And then eventually that will come to the ARB for a courtesy review, more informational. It's not a truly discretionary project, but we would like to hear what the ARB has to say about it. So thank you.
On the Bayshore project coming up on the 20th, is it your intention, Chair Thompson, to present the board's position on that? How are you thinking of dealing with that?
Vice Chair Hirsch and I have been discussing, yeah, we would give a little, I think probably David would actually, yeah.
Well, this one should be discussed a little bit, I think. How do we do this? We had a unified point of view in rejecting it. And if the council is going to ask us to comment on it, it seemed to me that one possibility would be that every one of us who were party to this one look through the minutes of that meeting and determine maybe 2 or 3 items that they thought were the essential items, and that the presenter then would be able to use those at the board meeting. That's one possibility. Understand, Peter, you had some thoughts about maybe one person should make the presentation, but if we could, let's discuss it this way,
Yeah.
Is that a reasonable idea?
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
In conformance with the Brown Act, we just need to be careful that we're not having, meetings outside of the public view. And so I think if board members wanted to send you an email saying sort of these are their high points that they want to make sure that you address, I think that sort of one-way communication is very possible. It just can't be 2 ways.
That's what I was thinking. So it could be one way, could be either to Ozma or to myself. And that you look over the list of things that we did discuss in detail. If there's duplication, that's okay, because it becomes a higher priority. But
Yeah, we
it
can
seems
prioritize.
Like, what I liked about it is that we were all involved. We were all a part of that. And so I thought that would be a way in which it could be presented as well. That I've canvassed, or Ozma's canvassed, whoever agrees to make this presentation has canvassed our board, and we had these qualifications about this project. Do I have to make a motion for that?
No, I just want to, I guess I'm concerned that this is a case where the board unanimously recommended denial. And I don't feel that we have strong support from staff for that. And I think that it's really important that the council hear directly from us what the board's position is. And so I want to be sure that whoever stands in front of the council says that unequivocally.
Unequivocal.
And so I was willing to do that myself, but I don't care so much who stands there as much as what we say. I think it's really important for the integrity of our board that our position be made crystal clear to the city council. So I'm willing to just say we can
100%.
all send messages to our chair and she can deal with that as she sees fit. If you want to delegate that responsibility to somebody, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think David and I can work on that together. Yeah.
Perfect.
And I think from a staff perspective, I mean, we just want to be clear that we understand the ARB rarely denies projects. And so we do take that very seriously. But I think we're feeling like, how we need to stay in conformance with state law and things of that nature. And so that's where we're start to be uncomfortable, is making sure that we adhere to state law as well. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions, comments, or announcements? All right, well, thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned.